All right, good afternoon, everyone. The December 18th, 2025 work session of the Gwinnett County Board of Education is now called to order. Without further delay, I turn the meeting over to Interim Superintendent Dr. Taylor to bring us our first presentation.
Thank you, Chair Dr. Simmons, and good afternoon, everyone. We do have a full house today and a very full agenda, so we're going to try to move through at a perky pace. At this time, I'll call Kathy Harden, Chief Human Resources Officer, to introduce the teams presenting on the Cross-Functional Advisory Team, or XFAT. Chief Harden.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Good afternoon, Chairperson Dr. Simmons, board members, and Interim Superintendent Dr. Taylor. Gwinnett County Schools remains committed to continuous quality improvement, or CQI, to achieve its goals. This process involves identifying strengths and challenges across our organization, analyzing them, and then testing and implementing solutions. A core tenet of CQI is a proactive culture that supports ongoing learning. Additionally, it depends heavily on the active engagement of stakeholders to strengthen the effectiveness of our processes, people, and the service we provide to our communities. To formally facilitate this engagement, we utilize cross-functional advisory teams, commonly referred to as XFATs. Following the reinstatement of XFATs in August of 2025, employees at all levels were invited to apply to serve on a team. Over the last 3 months, selected representative groups actively participated in the XFAT process. They have focused on investigating key improvement opportunities related to the topics of support systems for specialized student groups, HR staffing, and student-based budgeting. Today, these XFAT teams will present their final reports and recommended actions to the board for consideration. We sincerely appreciate the volunteer efforts, time, and commitment of these employees to ensure excellence for our students, staff, and families. To begin the XFAT report, I'd like to invite Dr. Chandra Walker to provide a description of the district-wide application process for participation in this improvement process. Dr. Walker.
Good afternoon. To ensure the success of XFATs, the inclusion of staff at all levels of the organization was prioritized. The active participation of both certified and classified employee voices informed the XFAT process by providing diverse perspectives that were critical to continuous improvement. To maintain transparency, the process began with extensive advertisement and the open call for applications accessible through the GCPS employee portal. This system allowed employees to highlight prior XFAT experience, specific divisions of interest, and unique talents that could elevate the work. When forming each team, sponsors and facilitators reviewed the applicant pool to select members based on specific needs of the XFAT. Completed applications remain active and have created a pool for the selection of team members as future XFATs are launched. We will now begin with our first XFAT report, support systems for specialized student groups, followed by HR staffing and student-based budgeting.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Dr. Simmons, board members, Dr. Taylor. We are pleased to present the Teaching and Learning Support Systems for Specialized Student Groups Cross-Functional Advisory Final Report. I had the great pleasure of facilitating this year's Teaching and Learning Specialized Student Support Systems XFAT. 13 representatives sitting behind me from across the district have collaborated over the last 10 weeks to arrive at our final 4 recommendations. The team consisted of the teacher, school administrator, and district leader voice. The selection process for this XFAT ensured expertise in student support programs, the district instructional framework, staffing structures, and school operations. This afternoon, Mr. Aaron Barnwell, teacher at Northbrook Middle School, Dr. Whitney Young, assistant principal at Level Creek Elementary School, and Dr. Gypsy Hernandez, principal at McClure Health Science High School, will present our report on behalf of our XFAT team. I do want to personally thank our recorder, Ms. Leslie Harris, and each team member for their time and dedication to this process. This XFAT team was tasked with exploring the processes used to provide evidence-based instruction and support to students in multilingual, gifted, and special education programs. 3 key drivers established the strategic need for this XFAT. 1, our Blueprint for the Future, Strategic Priority 2, Equity, Goal 2A, Multi-tiered supportive system of supports, and Goal 2B, Opportunity and Access. Also, the 2025 Moving Forward Together Transition Plan, which underscored the need for stronger, fully coordinated support systems for our specialized student groups. And lastly, the 2025 West Ed Review, which provided specific high-leverage recommendations for our multilingual learner program, and they have clear systemic implications for gifted and special education as well. For our approach, we employed a gap analysis methodology. This helped us to examine the full landscape, from how we identify students and deploy staff, to how we equip teachers and leaders to deliver integrated services systematically across the district. Mr. Barnwell.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. I appreciate the opportunity to share the area of study and the district's current status related to this XFAT. One major theme that surfaced during our work is that our path forward is less about isolated fixes and more about strategic integration, a focus on high-level implementation to serve all specialized learners effectively. The goal of this XFAT team was to drive measurable, meaningful growth that reflects the true potential of every learner. By aligning the work currently happening within our district with the XFAT recommendations, we can seize this opportunity to transform the educational experience for our most promising students. First, we would like to ground ourselves in the scope of who we are serving. In school year 2024-25, we served over 99,000 students across multilingual learning, special education, and gifted programs. That is a substantial portion of our student population. Our team partnered with the Research and Evaluation Department, who identified 37,118 students receiving gifted services this year, 20% of our entire student population. This is the highest number in the most diverse group in GCPS history. This contributes to positive growth. However, our overall data amplifies that we need systems that can scale with the demand of services. Our 2025 Georgia Milestones Assessment System results provided our team with valuable insight. A snapshot of the results that were outlined in the previous work session helped to anchor us and highlighted why the issue of study was critical to examine. As reflected here, 46% of third grade multilingual learners are reading at grade level or above. 38% of students receiving special education services hit that benchmark, compared to 67% of all GCPS third graders reading at grade level. The team observed that teachers have various opportunities to engage in high levels of professional learning, specifically in endorsement programs offered by the district. However, there is a need for a more robust approach within the endorsement programs to impact how to identify and support multi-exceptional students, those who receive gifted, multilingual, and/or special education services. Additionally, there is an opportunity to incentivize qualified educators by offering a stipend for completing the endorsement programs. Currently, the multilingual department offers a stipend for completing ESOL endorsement, but funds are not available for teachers who complete the gifted endorsement. As a district, we have components of excellence and room to grow into a coherent system of analyzing data trends to inform strategic alignment for effective staffing, scheduling, and unified professional learning around our integrated services. Dr. Young?
Our cross-functional team engaged in deep listening and feedback loops with students, families, and staff to envision an ideal educational experience for all. The feedback was incredibly consistent and encouraging. Our community supports a system that truly honors student assets. We launched this work by interrogating our own biases to safeguard we were listening with a clear lens. By doing so, we committed to keeping students at the center, allowing their lived experiences to serve as the anchor for our recommendations. During our weekly meetings, our team reviewed data and narrative from empathy interviews with students, staff, and families. We posed questions like, what does an ideal support system look like? What should the team prioritize? And how can communication between home and school be improved? Additionally, we invited a panel of parents and community advocates in to learn more about their stance on a model integrated system of supports. Each week, the use of protocols allowed the team to refine the emerging themes, ask additional questions, and identify future topics for study. As Dr. Scott briefly mentioned, our methodology engaged a triangulation of data, a comprehensive review of academic scholarship, an external district policy review, deep stakeholder engagement, and an analysis of current district initiatives. This rigorous process allowed us to conduct a precise gap analysis, mapping a bridge from our current reality to our ideal system. The board has previously been briefed on the 2025 West Ed Review, which identified high priority actions for our multilingual learner program. Our team conducted a deep analysis of that report, focusing on its 5 core recommendations. Establish a district-wide vision for multilingual learner education, strengthen classroom instruction, enhance professional learning and teacher support, strengthen leadership and oversight, and elevate parent and caregiver engagement. Our research confirmed that these recommendations are not limited to multilingual learners. They apply directly to all 3 specialized support systems. What we heard from our panel members, empathy interviews, and the principal feedback session was a call for coherence. From families and students, there was a strong appreciation for the positive school environments GCPS has built. Students specifically highlighted their home languages as a source of pride and are asking for rigorous, relevant, and collaborative learning experiences that leverage those strengths. Parents conveyed that effective communication between families and schools is essential. All principals had the opportunity to share successes and challenges in supporting students receiving specialized services. From teachers and principals, our educators are asking for actionable implementation support. They want to move beyond off-site professional learning and toward job-embedded coaching and accessible one-stop resources. Principals specifically requested concrete tools like video exemplars of differentiated high-quality instruction for all 3 tiers and flexible staffing models to help them execute this vision at the school level. Motivated by an unwavering commitment to an equity-driven mindset, we are refining our district-wide system to better serve students receiving multilingual, gifted, and special education programming. While services are currently in place, we must become more strategic in our execution. We will achieve this reality by operationalizing our values through rigorous implementation monitoring, unifying staffing and policies to maximize impact, and building educator capacity to recognize and cultivate every student's unique strengths. Dr. Hernandez.
Based on the work presented by my teammates, the team has come to consensus on 4 recommendations. Our first recommendation is to engage the newly formed policy committee to develop a comprehensive policy that ensures alignment and coherence across support services for multilingual learners, gifted students, and those receiving special education services. This policy should promote integrated service delivery, break down silos, and strengthen collaboration among departments to better support the whole child. As part of this recommendation, we specifically propose to define multi-exceptional students to include twice exceptional learners, and develop coherent, integrated, and comprehensive support structures that strengthen access to both gifted and special education services. Enhance the coordination of service requirements for all 3 student groups, as well as improve communication systems to support cross-departmental collaboration. Our policies must function in harmony to support the whole child. Consider a twice exceptional student, one who requires both gifted services and special education services, or a multilingual learner with additional needs such as gifted and special educational services. These students require schedules designed for both academic rigor and essential support. By synchronizing our staffing and scheduling, we can ensure these critical services complement each other rather than compete. This alignment also streamlines communication, empowering guardians to advocate effectively for their child's full change of needs. The hope of this policy is that it can remove barriers for implementation and keep student achievement at the center. Our next recommendation addresses the engine of this entire system, our educators. Vision and policy are essential, but they only live if our teachers have the capacity to execute them. We are requesting a multi-year, sustained commitment in job-embedded professional learning. This investment focuses on 3 structural shifts. Personnel. We recommend establishing a building generalist or MTSS coordinator at each site. This role is critical for designing interventions across tiers 1, 2, and 3, ensuring that differentiation isn't just a buzzword, but a daily practice. For district-wide implementation, we recommend initially prioritizing high-need schools. We recommend the generalists focus on job-embedded coaching cycles, host classrooms, and collaborative learning teams to help close the implementation gaps at local schools. Process. Additionally, we are recommending that there be a portion of digital learning days set aside for embedded professional learning. For future calendars, we recommend that professional learning days be included as standalone days. We suggest the professional learning decide include a strong focus on differentiation and supporting implementation through an increase in exposure to subject matter expertise and exemplars. Sustainability. To effectively address teacher retention amidst current workforce challenges, we recommend incentivizing advanced professional learning through compensation for completed endorsement programs. To ensure a return on this investment, we propose requiring a 1-year commitment to the school side post-endorsement. We must also address leadership strategy and accountability. We know our school leaders are managing multiple funding streams and program requirements, and this can lead to unintentional fragmented monitoring. This recommendation involves 3 components. Alignment. Align our district evaluation measures to the school and team fidelity tools. There is an opportunity to explore how Georgia MTSS tools and Local School for Improvement, LSPI tools, are aligned. Coherence. Currently, we have implemented a district-wide learning walk tool. We have opportunity to align our state and local schools to conduct comprehensive learning walks and MTSS walkthroughs. The goal here is to identify gaps in real time and eliminate any silos that may exist between our specialized departments. Capacity. Invest in training our leaders on these specific tools. We want our principals to feel confident interpreting fidelity data so they can lead their teams toward asset-based improvements. The team heard from stakeholders that the use of our current structures for leader and aspiring leader professional learning designs, such as Summer Leadership Conference, professional learning opportunities, aspiring leader program, and aspiring principal program would be ideal for these type of training sessions. The goal would be to offer bite-sized learning so that leaders could take the information and implement immediately. Finally, our work does not end with these initial recommendations. True systemic change requires ongoing inquiry. We have identified 3 specific areas for future study to ensure long-term success. First, efficacy of service models. We currently utilize various delivery models across the district. We need to dig deeper into the data to determine which specific models are driving the most growth for our specialized population so we can replicate what works. Second, facilities equity. We need to audit our physical spaces. Do our specialized student groups have equitable access to high-quality learning environments? Third, HR allotments. We want to explore the human resources school allotment process. We believe schools should be able to propose database reasons for specific staffing points, allowing for more flexibility to meet unique school needs for specialized student groups. Dr. Scott?
The total estimated cost of these recommendations is $18.8 million. This investment funds 1 teacher allotted point per school for 143 schools to serve as a generalist or MTSS coordinator. This role is essential for supporting local school contacts with student scheduling and services. Given the potential budget restraints, we do suggest concessions such as piloting the MTSS generalist coordinator role with prioritized high-need schools to first evaluate the position's impact. Additionally, we propose that teachers obtaining the year-long gifted endorsement receive a $1,000 completion stipend, aligning with the current incentive for the year-long ESOL endorsement. This cost here reflects a 1-year cost for the completion of 300 teachers. This concludes our presentation. The XFAT team thanks you for the opportunity to engage in this quality improvement process, and we do look forward to continued work in supporting the success of Gwinnett County Public Schools. Thank you.
Yeah, are we going to ask questions for each of these, or are we going to go through all of them, and how do you? Okay.
So if we pursue asking questions after each, we have to be mindful of our timing. I think that according to the agenda, we were slated with 15 minutes per presentation. We're already over. Okay, so we just have to be mindful of our agenda. So do you all want to proceed with questions now? Or are you okay to wait? Okay to wait, okay. Rachel? You're okay to wait? Steve Gasper? Okay, so we will wait. Thank you so much. You can proceed.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Dr. Simmons, board members, and Dr. Taylor. We are pleased to present the Human Resources Staffing Cross-Functional Advisory Team final report this afternoon. I've had the honor of facilitating this year's Human Resources Staffing XFAT. 12 representatives from across the district have collaborated together over the last 10 weeks to arrive at our final consensus recommendations. Today, Ms. Mary Blauvelt, teacher at Baldwin Elementary School, Ms. Muriel Halfkinney, District Special Education Coordinator, and Mr. Lenny George, principal at Parsons Elementary School, will present the report on behalf of the HR Staffing XFAT team. To explore our issue for study, the HR Staffing XFAT examined 5 items: current staffing patterns and allotment models, the alignment between staffing structures and school needs, the effectiveness of existing recruitment, hiring, and placement practices, compensation and role design factors, as well as opportunities to strengthen data-informed decision-making. The HR Staffing XFAT's charge is to evaluate the processes, policies, and practices that affect all aspects of staffing in Gwinnett County Public Schools. Ms. Blauvelt.
As we examine the current staffing landscape across GCPS, several themes emerged. First, the current staffing allocations are driven primarily by student enrollment rather than the intensity of student needs. While this model ensures consistency, it does not fully account for the increasingly diverse instructional demands within GCPS schools, particularly for students requiring specialized supports. Second, the data reinforces that students receiving special education and multilingual learner services consistently perform below their grade level peers. However, these same students demonstrate measurable growth when additional instructional supports are in place. This tells us that targeted staffing investments could have a strong direct influence on student outcomes and help close achievement gaps. Third, the current compensation structure does not include differentiated pay for certified teachers serving in specialized roles such as special education or multilingual learner instruction. This creates challenges in recruiting and retaining educators for our most specialized and hard-to-staff classrooms. Also, we continue to see elevated turnover among paraprofessionals, a group that plays a critical role in instructional support, classroom management, and safety. Even highly qualified candidates often decline offers due to the current compensation package, which is not competitive across the metro region. Our paraprofessional retention rates highlight the challenge. Over the last 7 years, GCPS paraprofessional rates have ranged from 66.3% to 75.6%. While we see some improvements in the last 2 years, overall retention remains inconsistent and well below where we need it to be to sustain strong, stable support for our classrooms. Finally, the role of the assistant principal has evolved significantly. APs are now providing additional instructional leadership, handling increased behavioral and community demands, and serving as the operational backbone of schools. Despite this shift, our compensation package has not kept pace. We face two major challenges: compression between the teacher salary schedule and the assistant principal schedule, and lack of competitiveness across Metro Atlanta, which impacts our ability to attract and retain strong leaders. Taken together, these current state findings highlight clear opportunities to examine how staffing structures, compensation systems, and resource allocations can better support the diverse needs of GCPS schools and improve outcomes for students. A core strength of this process has been the depth and consistency of engagement with stakeholders. First, the XFAT met weekly to review data and discuss emerging patterns and draft potential recommendations. Second, we intentionally engaged a wide range of stakeholders, including teachers, assistant principals, and data district owners. Using structured protocols, we gathered insights that helped us validate the needs we were seeing in the data. This engagement ensured our analysis was grounded in real experiences of those closest to the work. Finally, we relied on weekly feedback loops to refine our thinking. These discussions provided real-time clarity, allowed us to adjust assumptions, and surfaced areas where additional research or deeper data analysis was needed. This iterative approach strengthened the quality of the findings and helped ensure emerging recommendations were both responsive and feasible. Overall, stakeholder engagement has been central to the work, shaping the understanding of the current state and driving us toward meaningful, data-informed next steps. Ms. Halfkenny.
The research process incorporated a deep review of data, extensive stakeholder engagement, and an analysis of prior work to understand the root causes of the current staffing challenges. We began by engaging teachers, school leaders, and district data owners using structured protocols, empathy interview cycles, and expert interviews to validate needs, surface pain points, and ensure alignment across multiple perspectives. During empathy interviews, we asked questions like, what's working well with staffing? What challenges or frustrations have you experienced? If you could suggest one change, what would it be and why? These conversations helped identify the processes, policies, and practices that require deeper examination. We also reviewed previous human resources staffing exFAT recommendations to ensure continuity of work. In addition, the team analyzed our district's current allotment formulas, FTE processes, mandated program requirements, as well as the current compensation structures. This analysis integrated both qualitative feedback from stakeholders and quantitative data related to budget, enrollment, program mandates, and compensation benchmarks. Several consistent themes emerged across groups. Retention is tied to support, workload, and trust. Everything can't be a teacher responsibility. Skill gaps are growing among new employees. Pay concerns are significant for support positions, especially paraprofessionals. Many assistant principals described their workload as increasingly complex and reported that current compensation does not reflect the scope of responsibilities. Schools want staffing to reflect student need, not just enrollment. More specifically, our research confirmed that staffing allocations are driven primarily by enrollment rather than the intensity of student needs. This disproportionately affects schools with high multilingual learner or special education populations. These schools often require additional instructional and behavioral support, but do not consistently receive staffing aligned with that level of need. We analyzed paraprofessional compensation as part of our quantitative review and found that GCPS paraprofessional salaries are not competitive within the broader market. The analysis highlighted the competitive pressures we face, especially as nearby districts offer higher pay for similar roles. Feedback from GCPS principals through both empathy interviews and follow-up surveys includes the following regarding paraprofessional compensation. Quote, "A paraprofessional's job is incredibly difficult. We place our most vulnerable students in their care. In order to attract and retain the right people for these positions, their pay should be increased," end quote. Quote, "Our top priority must be ensuring that we provide compensation that does not leave our staff struggling to make ends meet. Increasing pay for our paras is essential. We have a moral and professional responsibility to care for those who care for our children. This is not simply an operational concern. It is a matter of dignity, humanity, and doing what is right," end quote. Our review of assistant principal compensation across Metro Atlanta found that the average GCPS AP salary of $89,160 for a 200-day contract is generally below neighboring districts, many of which offer higher pay paired with 10 to 30 additional workdays. Overall, the data suggests GCPS salaries are not consistently competitive given the increasing complexity and demands of the AP role. Feedback from GCPS principals through both empathy interviews and follow-up surveys includes the following related to assistant principal compensation and contract days. Quote, "We are losing great APs due to the amount of work that is being asked of them. Their pay is not far from a teacher's salary, and they are not wanting to do that much work for almost the same salary," end quote. Quote, "AP compensation and work calendar has needed to be updated for years. This is an excellent opportunity to make much-needed improvements," end quote. The Department of Employee Services within Human Resources is currently collaborating with an external partner on a compensation study to help inform future compensation adjustments. Together, these findings create a clear picture. Our staffing structures, compensation models, and support systems have not fully kept pace with the changing needs of our students and schools. These insights inform the exFAT's exploration of potential pathways to strengthen staffing across GCPS. As we look ahead, the desired state reflects the areas where strategic investment will have the greatest impact on student achievement as well as school staffing. First, we aim to increase compensation for paraprofessionals and assistant principals. Second, we are proposing the creation of multilingual learner instructional coach positions strategically housed in schools with the highest concentration of multilingual learners. These coaches would provide direct, job-embedded support to teachers, help strengthen Tier 1 instruction, and build internal capacity in schools where multilingual learner needs are most significant. Finally, we are recommending a differentiated compensation package for both special education and multilingual learners. Together, these actions position us to strengthen instructional quality, support school leaders, and build a more stable, sustainable workforce aligned to the district's strategic plan. Mr. George?
The Human Resources Staffing XFAT reached consensus on 4 recommendations that I will discuss today. Recommendations were reviewed using a rubric considering alignment with district priorities, cost, potential impact, and stakeholder feedback. Consensus was achieved through discussion and iterative refinement. As we move forward, this recommendation incorporates 2 compensation components to be examined in concert with the findings from the district's compensation study. First, for assistant principals, we recommend reviewing the current number of contract days worked in annual compensation to ensure the role accurately reflects the level of responsibility and leadership required at the school level. This analysis will determine the adjustments that are necessary to better align expectations, daily duties, and district leadership standards. Second, we are recommending an increase in compensation for all paraprofessionals. This adjustment is being considered to maintain compensation alignment across employee groups and to reflect the increasingly critical role that our paraprofessionals play in supporting instruction and student needs. They are also a vital part of our Grow Your Own Teacher pipeline, which has proven to be an impactful strategy in addressing staffing stability. The cost of recommendation 1 is to be determined, as we are awaiting the recommendations of the compensation study to suggest what actual salary adjustments would be appropriate for both assistant principals and paraprofessionals. As we analyzed multilingual learner data, it became clear that our schools with the highest multilingual learner populations needed dedicated support beyond what's currently available. This recommendation proposes allocating 30 district multilingual learner instructional positions strategically housed each year in the schools with the highest needs, 6 for high schools, 6 for middle schools, and 18 for elementary schools. To determine highest need, schools will be ranked by level on percentage of direct served multilingual learner students. The schools with the highest percentage will receive support from a multilingual learner instructional coach. Unlike current district coaching roles, these multilingual learner coaches would join the faculty at their identified school and report to the building each day throughout their 190-day contract period, very much similar to the current college and career specialists that support GCPS high school academies. These coaches would be exclusively focused on building teacher capacity in language acquisition strategies, supporting instructional planning, and strengthening practices that directly impact multilingual learner student achievement. With this dedicated role, support is not spread thin, it is intentionally concentrated where it will have the greatest impact. The estimated annual cost is $3.9 million. Our next recommendation proposes implementing a differentiated compensation package for teachers hired specifically into special education and multilingual learner teacher roles. Teachers in these job codes would receive an annual supplement up to $3,000. The XFAT recognizes variability of teaching duties and responsibilities, especially within special education teacher job codes. Therefore, the annual supplement can be tiered based on the type of special education or multilingual learner teacher. Should a teacher transfer to a role outside of special education or multilingual learner, the supplement would no longer apply, ensuring that the investment remains targeted to high-needs positions. The estimated annual cost of this compensation supplement is $10.2 million. We believe this targeted investment will strengthen recruitment, reduce turnover, and enhance instructional continuity for the students who need it most. As part of the Human Resources XFAT process, several areas emerged as important but not yet ready for full recommendations. While the initial research and stakeholder engagement provided valuable insight, the team believes these topics require additional analysis to fully understand long-term implications, costs, and operational practicality. The first area is the potential impact and return on investment of increasing staff allotments, specifically to support mandated programs such as MTSS, PBIS, 504, and attendance, and support for multilingual learner and special education students through increased instructional aid or paraprofessional support. These needs were consistently surfaced through empathy interviews and data reviews, but implementing changes in this area would require a deeper cost-benefit analysis to understand sustainability and staffing structure impact. The second area of study is the feasibility of creating a GCPS framework using multiple measures to define schools in high need. This would involve developing an internal opportunity index that uses consistent variables and thresholds to identify school-level need. Such a framework could inform future staffing allocations and differentiated compensation strategies. This approach has strong potential, but it is complex and requires longer-term study and thoughtful cross-divisional collaboration to ensure clarity, scalability, and alignment with district equity priorities. These areas hold promise and align closely with our strategic direction, but we do recommend additional study before advancing to formal proposals. Dr. Mosley?
The total estimated cost of the recommendations presented today is $14.1 million, with the cost of recommendation 1 to be determined by the results of the district's compensation study. We recognize this represents a significant investment, and we fully understand that not every recommendation may be feasible within our current budget constraints. However, our intent is to provide a comprehensive view of the strategies with the greatest potential to positively impact staffing, student outcomes, and long-term workforce sustainability. This concludes our XFAT presentation. On behalf of the HR Staffing XFAT team, we thank you for the opportunity to engage in the process of continuously quality improvement.
Good afternoon. Due to the nature of the issue for study and impact to local schools, you will notice 9 principles were selected for the student-based budgeting XFAT. These principles were carefully chosen to reflect the diversity of our schools, bringing perspectives from every region of the county and each board district. Together, and in conjunction with our teacher, assistant principal, student support services leader, and cluster superintendent, they represent the breadth of unique experiences and needs across our district, ensuring a well-rounded approach to this work. Today, Adrienne Tedesco, principal of Meadow Creek Elementary School, Dr. Jennifer Callahan, principal of Radloff Middle School, and Dr. Jonathan Weatherington, principal of Paul Duke STEM High School, will present our report on behalf of the student-based budgeting XFAT. As part of our district's commitment to continuous quality improvement, this XFAT examined the effectiveness of student-based budgeting, or SBB, as a method for achieving Strategic Plan Goal 2C, equitable resource allocation. This goal calls for ensuring that funding systems and processes support the unique student and community needs of each school, as well as the redesign of the school allotment process to consider the impacts of poverty and allotment ratios and formulas. Principal Tedesco.
The purpose of the student-based budgeting XFAT was to research, explore, and make a final determination to either recommend developing a student-based budgeting formula or continue utilizing the current local school funding formula to allocate resources to local schools. Our main objective was to ensure we are funding the unique needs of our schools and students. During our work, we investigated how to best allocate the resources currently available to meet the needs of all students while minimizing negative impacts of any reallocations. Student-based budgeting is a school funding system where schools receive dollars rather than points based on the number of enrolled students and their individual needs, often giving school leaders more flexibility over their budgets and staffing plan. These systems typically assign a baseline dollar amount of funding for every student and assign additional weights for specific types of students that direct more dollars towards agreed-upon areas of need. While our current system allocates funding both equally and equitably, the degree to which it addresses equity was an area of focus for this XFAT. The impact of this work cannot be understated. The current formula has served the district for more than 30 years and accounts for approximately 80% of the general fund budget. The scope and scale of Gwinnett County Public Schools added a layer of complexity to our work. The team agreed whatever direction we go, a methodical, intentional, and data-driven approach would be prudent. Gwinnett County Public Schools uses an allocation formula that aligns to Georgia's Quality Basic Education Funding Formula, or QBE, to staff schools. The QBE formula allocates resources to districts using various weights based on student enrollment in specific instructional programs or categories. The district then applies its own staffing point formulas to allocate state QBE and local property tax revenues to local schools, funding teachers, paraprofessionals, and support staff. We utilize a point-based funding system that allocates money based on a formula of points assigned to student and program needs. Each student, service, program, or segment generates a set number of points, and those points are used by principals to staff school-based positions that cost varying amounts of points based on the average salaries and benefits of those positions. This point-based system ensures principals are incentivized to hire the most qualified teachers and leaders to support students without focusing on their true cost, which could create an incentive to focus on quantity rather than quality. Enrollment bands, fixed ratios, and grade level class size are used to determine staffing. Extra points are awarded by categories, type 1, 2, and 4 for poverty, mobility, and special education. Some points are determined by enrollment in specific program areas such as ESOL, gifted, and special education. The majority of points come from our class size funding ratios, which can be thought of as the base amount of staffing funds for all schools. The current system is designed to incentivize principals to earn more QBE revenue for the district, growing the revenue available to be allocated for all schools. This is done through creating additional allocations for programs such as ESOL, remedial education programs, and gifted, which are assigned higher weights in the state QBE formula. As schools earn more from the state for these and other programs, they earn more points to use to meet the needs of the students in school. The XFAT team spent a great deal of time researching, investigating, and then came to consensus that when we talk about poverty, we often refer to free and reduced lunch percentages, or title versus non-title. However, a student receiving free lunch may have very different needs than a student receiving reduced lunch. And a multilingual learner who arrived to our community yesterday has very different needs than a multilingual learner who is nearing exit criteria for ESOL services. Our current system does not recognize or differentiate funding for these differences. We also know that all schools in Gwinnett, regardless of location, have students experiencing these challenges. So this is a district-wide opportunity impacting every school at varying levels. The team prioritized engaging stakeholders across the district, including principals, teachers, parents, and central office leaders. At the November principal level meetings, principals were engaged in a discussion around unique student needs led by the principals on the student-based budgeting XFAT. At the end of the session, a survey was given that was used to inform and refine the recommendations you will hear shortly. Each participating team member engaged their school's parent groups and/or teachers in a discussion to provide feedback. This feedback varied at each school. However, some common themes were agreement that some students and schools need more resources than others, the need for details and illustrations to see the real impact to schools, and the need to minimize any negative impacts to schools with a methodical, intentional approach to implementing the change. We also found that most stakeholders are not fully aware of how schools are currently funded. The team heard from district leaders in special education, multilingual learner program, and gifted program areas about the unique needs of participating students, and a current GCPS principal who shared their experience as a principal in a district that used a student-based budgeting model. Dr. Callahan.
The XFAT team engaged in self-study, reflection, and a group debate about the most extensive research to date. This research, funded by the U.S. Department of Education and led by Georgetown professor and the director of the Edunomics Lab, Dr. Margarita Rosa, was a 3-year study that examined 19 public school districts utilizing student-based budgeting models. It focused on why districts chose to adopt these models. Was there a typical model being used? And what was the impact on student achievement and closing of achievement gaps for specific student groups? And did these districts spend more on at-risk students? The study found that every district used a different model for allocating funds to different groups or needs. Some districts used only grade level, while others used grade level and poverty, while others factored in many different allocations, such as poverty, multilingual learners, gifted students, homelessness, and special education. Additionally, only one of the 19 districts studied allocated more than half of their funds to the student-based budgeting methodology, with the remainder of funds being allocated equally through categorical or position-specific allocations. The research showed that districts implemented student-based budgeting models to increase transparency, equity, and principal flexibility, and that generally these goals were met. The study also found that these districts increased spending on at-risk students over time. However, that spending did not result in the closing of achievement gaps. While overall student achievement did see positive progress, gaps of specific student groups did not improve. In fact, evidence showed these gaps widened as their rate of growth was slower than that of their peers, thus increasing the gaps. After extensive research, data, deliberation, and debate, the work of the XFAT team shifted from recommending to keep the current formula or implementing a student-based budgeting formula to recommending to keep the current formula while incorporating beneficial components of the student-based budgeting formulas. It was determined that components of student-based budgeting could benefit our schools, but moving methodically towards a more student-based budgeting-centric model would be advantageous for several reasons. First, the current data shows student-based budgeting does not close gaps for specific student groups. Secondly, the current system allows principals to remain instructional leaders and provides incentives that grow the amount of QBE funding available for all schools. Lastly, and most importantly, determining the impact on all schools is needed to ensure that the district is truly generating equity across all schools and not negatively impacting some schools. Dr. Wetherington.
I will now address the recommendations and the cost associated. The first recommendation contains 2 components. It is to develop an individual student count-based allocation for multilingual learners and free and reduced lunch students to improve equity and align resources to student need. It is critical that this new allocation provide differentiated funding for multilingual learners and students in poverty to recognize and fund the difference between a multilingual student who is recently arrived versus one who is nearing exit criteria, and the difference between a student receiving free or reduced lunch. This new formula could be funded by reducing the current based formula that all students receive, resulting in no net change to the budget. While the base all schools would receive would have a reduction, all schools would receive some portion of this new allocation, as every school has both multilingual students and students in poverty. Consideration to exclude specific grade levels from the base reduction, such as K through 2, could be given. This recommendation is a transition from our current funding method that would move the needle on equitably funding schools. It ensures funds follow individual students and acknowledges the differentiated needs of students, highlighting the district's commitment to each and every. We also recommend GCPS create multiple funding formulas that will incorporate the student-based budgeting elements previously mentioned. This approach directly aligns funding with the instructional and wraparound supports required by multilingual learners and economically disadvantaged students, and can be integrated seamlessly into the existing GCPS framework using available data. Building multiple models would allow for public engagement and input to the process and provide decision makers with school-level impact data needed to make an informed decision. This would be extremely important change, so allowing time to get it right is vital. Lastly, it will be important that actual salary costs be considered rather than budgeted cost due to schools having various levels of staff experience. Our second recommendation is to make technical changes to the current funding model. This recommendation contains 4 components. Special education self-contained units earn school funding from both special education and the main general fund allocation. It's important to note that while schools do receive teacher and para support through the special education department for self-contained units, they receive some additional general point fund allocations for self-contained units up to 11. Based on recent GCPS data, Gwinnett has 32 schools with more than 11 self-contained units. These additional units create challenges at schools due to the additional complex IEP requirements, paperwork and documentation, and potential increased behavioral interventions. We recommend increasing the cap to 20 units. No school has more than 18, and allocating an additional 0.25 points for every unit above 11. Allocating additional points to support our most vulnerable students would provide these 32 schools with additional resources to improve outcomes and benefit all students in these schools. Second, we recommend the district continue the formal allocation review committee during the HR staffing XFAT to review the allotment process on an annual basis to determine the effectiveness, relevance, and impact of current formulas. This annual review ensures that our allocation methodology is well positioned to meet the needs of all students on an annual basis. Third, examine and realign the point usage cost to schools to the true cost of these positions or programs. And lastly, we recommend that allowing the conversion of unused staffing points on school rosters into dollars so that schools can meet the individual needs of the students. We recommend these initiatives be implemented by the 2027-2028 school year so there's sufficient time to develop and examine options, determine the impact to local schools, as well as gather feedback from stakeholders. So in looking at cost, recommendation 1 would have no net cost. We recommend this new allocation be funded by a reallocation of points from the base staffing formula. A small change to the base staffing formula could provide $28 million as a starting place for this new allocation. As mentioned earlier, all schools have students in poverty and multilingual students, so all schools would receive a portion of this new allocation. Recommendation 2 is technical changes, which has 4 components. First, the special education self-contained unit change to adding funding of 0.25 points for every unit over 11 with a cap of 20 would increase the total points allocated by 26.25 points, which equates to $3.2 million. A cost-neutral option to fund this recommendation could also be accomplished. Second, there is no cost to continue the formal allotment committee to review the allotment process on an annual basis. Third, examine and realign the point usage cost, the true cost of positions or programs. An example of this is the extended day for teachers. Extended day costs schools 0.125 points, which equals $15,600, while the actual cost of the district is about $9,500, a difference of $6,100. The true cost of this realignment would be determined by the completion of this examination. And fourth, allowing the conversion of unused points to dollars would cost approximately $1.4 million for every $10,000 converted at each school. Mr. Johnson.
This concludes our XFAT presentation. On behalf of the Student-Based Budgeting XFAT team, we thank you for the opportunity to engage in the process of continuous quality improvement to positively impact the students, staff, and families of Gwinnett County Public Schools. Thank you.
At this time, the XFAT sponsors, facilitators, and teams stand ready for any questions that you all may have.
So we have, I think, 2 options. The next presentation was just intended to provide a preview of what the recommendations are going to be moving forward in January. We could fold that into the board briefings if you want to live here. The idea for this was to provide you with a high-level overview of the recommendations with the expectation that we're going to do some additional follow-ups once you've had a chance to kind of process through, look at it, review, if you wanted some additional time, but we're ready to pivot either way.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. With that said, team, we do have additional time for questioning, and so we will go ahead and open up for any comments or questions at this time.
Thank you, Chairwoman Dr. Simmons, and thank you to all the teams and all your hard work. It's very evident in the presentations. Really appreciate it. It sounds like a lot of the topics that this board has mentioned over the past couple of months, even dating back to May, is now we're seeing it in December, and just your hard work. I really, really appreciate all the thought that went into this. I will keep it short just for the sake of time. Really appreciate learning about the differential compensation models. One of the things I hear from teachers or stakeholders is this desire to have differential pay, especially for our paraprofessionals and our special education staff, our special education teachers who have, in addition to teaching, the administrative, the paperwork, like writing the IEPs and things of that nature. I have one question as it relates to the student-based budgeting and trying to wrap my mind around the QBE formula and how local schools are funded. And so my question is, will adjusting how we allocate resources, so moving from a point system potentially and transitioning to potential multiple funding models, how would that impact class sizes if local schools are funded based on student enrollment and head counts? Or would there be an impact?
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. They're not directly. So we aren't recommending, I'm over here. We aren't recommending to change fundamentally how we allocate to schools. We would keep the current point-based system, and the majority of the formula would stay exactly the same. The recommendation is to take a small portion, or $28 million, and create an additional allocation, which would turn into points. And so it would be exactly the same for principals as it is today. It would just be allocated differently to those schools for that portion of the new allocation.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm hearing is it would have no impact on class sizes?
It could have an impact on class sizes. Some schools may receive more points, some schools may receive less points. And if the principal determines that reducing class size is what those additional points would be used for, or maybe an MTSS generalist, that would be a principal level decision. So it could.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for I think it was wise, Dr. Taylor, to allow us to listen to all. I didn't have that thought at the beginning, but there are a lot of similar aspects that were coming to me as I listened to all three of these. And there's two key areas, and I want to throw it out now that, it's been even said that obviously more work is being done. So two key areas. I was at a very high-needs school recently, and I came away from my experience there having interacted with the teachers, the APs, the principal, with this idea that stipends, and I've seen that incorporated here, that stipends could be a really key way to help, and I love the way you phrase this, intensity, right? And it's also something that is maintained if you maintain the intensity, meaning if you get a stipend working in a particularly intense place, but then have a chance to go somewhere where it's less intense, the stipend goes away. I think a lot of times we've been thinking in terms of how we compensate based upon you reach a level, and then that level goes with you everywhere, as opposed to getting advancement at a title school and then taking that advancement and moving to a non-title. So I'm seeing this, and I love the idea that you all are thinking about how do we incorporate this strategically into what our teachers are asked to do, but it's their current ask, not their forever ask. And if it's a forever ask, it's great, it's there. So my challenge to you is maybe even expand the idea of stipends as you think about this, even into, I saw it applicable in all three of these, in terms of the flexibility, in terms of the needs, and even among the needs, the intensity that comes with it. And so I applaud your efforts. I love the creativity. And I mentioned this to Dr. Taylor, and we've had some conversations around it. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I was going to ask how you all might individually talk, but I don't need that. You're going to take more information or go get more information. So from my perspective, I want you to know my perspective, and that is I think there's a way to not necessarily overhaul the entire salary system, except for maybe simplify it. I think there's some ways that we could actually simplify the system and then give more compensation where it's needed. And it stays where it's needed. So I really appreciate that. The other thing that struck me, and I've been wrestling with this recently in just in my own personal deliberations, and that's the area of agency and ownership. So my question to each of these XFATs, and I loved the empathy interviews, and I think that's where this question would, and if anyone wants to jump in, scale to 1 to 10 in each one of these 3 XFATs. When you came down with your recommendations, how much true ownership do you perceive you'll get from your stakeholders? Because I think we come up with a lot of great ideas, and we impose, and we don't get full adoption because there's not ownership. If we get ownership, and I was even thinking about it from a student perspective, right? The more we increase ownership of our students in their various classes and in what they're learning, CTAE is a great example, right? Our students in CTAE that complete a pathway have a 99% grade. I mean, there's some ownership there. Gifted, great ownership, great numbers. How do we increase our ownership? So does anyone want to give me just a brief idea in terms of, as you've done these XFATs, as you've talked to the stakeholders, because I believe if we have ownership at the stakeholder level, that will translate to ownership at the student level and ultimately raise our outcomes, which is what we're looking for. Anyone? Yeah.
I'll take a first pass, and then Dr. Mosley may want to weigh in behind me. But I believe the way in which the XFATs are set up, the intentionality around the inclusiveness of who makes up the XFAT teams, and then how they go about doing the research within the XFAT itself is actually engaging with the stakeholders to determine what are the recommendations. So I do believe that there is clear voice equity embedded in the work. And so we do believe that the stakeholders will own whatever recommendations are approved because they've been a part of the process.
I would concur and agree. One of the things that we do every week in the XFAT process is to determine who else do we need to hear from, what more perspectives do we need, whose perspectives do we need to go deeper on. And so because of all of that, it builds in that ownership in the very end.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm that aspect of it, because I think that's absolutely critical in any path moving forward, that we don't just think about the outcome or the number or kind of a top-down, here's what if we make sure that each person in each area that they're working in owns it. I know in my situation, I have a base salary and then I can make more. So I get up every day working hard because I own what happens at the end of the year. And I know we don't work in that scenario, but at the same time, I know we have people that care. They're called, they want to do these things, but sometimes probably feel like they don't own it. And I think if we can take the commitment that our staff has and add a component of ownership, we can blow it out of the water. So that's my challenge to you as you continue moving forward.
Yeah, thank you to each and every team member that put in clearly a lot of hard work and effort and time into all that you did to really extract all this phenomenal information and great data to come here today to present to us. And you know, really what stood out to me, and I'm glad too that we had an opportunity to hear all of it before we had a chance to ask our questions, because there were a lot of common denominators and themes for me, and one of them is, and what stood out to me, and you know, you look at GCPS, largest school system in the state. You know, in my opinion, we have to set an example. And I think we do a lot of great things, and you guys did a lot of heavy lifting for us in terms of looking at some of the numbers and looking at what we pay our folks. And this is something that was always near and dear to my heart, campaigning and still sitting here on the board talking to teachers, talking to parapros that I know and that I'm close with, that we have to support them. And digging deeper into that, another common denominator is just talking to hearing you all talk about that our current system is not really closing the gaps the way we need to. And this is something that we have to really, really do better at. And hearing some of other comments of even potentially have an opportunity to pilot some of these ideas, I love it. Adding up the numbers, I get $37.5 million. For me, spending money on people, on good people to give us phenomenal outcomes, I have no problem doing that. Because I know at the end of the day, we are going to produce the best student for the best outcomes. And that is what we're here to do as a school system. That is what we do best. And so I am open, and I like what Mr. Knudsen said about ownership, and I even want to take that a step further in our teacher ownership and breaking that out to our parapros and our specialized teachers and giving them ownership, but giving them ownership in terms of compensating them properly. And GCPS needs to step up and do that in a way where they feel that they belong and they feel that they want to be here and stay here and not move around. And I too, like Mr. Knudsen, I work for my salary and I appreciate my salary, and I want to get up every day, roll out of bed, and do the best that I can for the money that I'm paid. And I want that competitive salary, and I know our teachers and our parapros and our specialized staff members want that as well. And that is something that we need to do better at, and we as a board need to strive to execute efficiently and make that happen for our teams. So again, in the interest of time, I want to keep my comments very brief, but that is the common denominator that I heard from the presentations today. And that is something that we need to focus on, and we will focus on. So thank you all again for being here today and for the time you all took to extract this information and share with us. And please keep up the good work and all the great things you do in our schools. So thank you.
Thank you all for your presentations. I really appreciate our expat teams really sharing all of the work that you all have done and how you have been intentionally inclusive of various voices. I do know that just being engaged in the community and out at schools and speaking with teachers and with students and families, a lot of the feedback that you all shared is really reflective of the voices of the community. There weren't really any surprises here, just confirmations. And so I am really pleased to see that there is consistency around the messaging, which also to me, further indicates our need to continue to improve. I appreciate in the presentation where you all shared the current state and you went even further to explain the desired state. And I think that there is where the truth is, because oftentimes we've heard how great GCPS is and not really talking about the opportunities that, like, it might not be so great in certain areas, or it might not be so great in addressing all of the needs. And I do appreciate that when we talk about equity, that equity is about addressing all needs of each and every child, regardless of where they are, whether they're in a Title I area or not in a Title I area. And what I see in this presentation is that there is this really structured way in which y'all have thought about how do we make sure we meet the needs of our children. At the end of the day, we're here for academic success, for overall student achievement. And when we center the needs of our children, and when we look at the data focused on that, I see you all have done that. With the research that you all have shared, I also appreciate the summary research. I would say I would love to get some numbers around. I'm a data person, so I would love to get some numbers around some of the research findings that you all shared. I think that would be helpful maybe in the future, sharing some specific percentages around the research findings you all had. I think that would be helpful. The other thing I want to say is the consistency around our MLL population and how you all have sort of laid out the differentiation around access levels. And I think that is something that I've heard, and I really appreciate that you all have really determined that there is a different level of investment that's necessary from someone who's new, who's just here in the country versus someone who's been here and still need continuous support. And that level of investment is something that I'm really conscious of, and I'm very glad that you all capture that. I also want to say, as we engaged in this process, you all, our XFAT teams did review our MLL policy, correct? I want to just confirm that. Okay. And so what I also noticed is in our MLL policy, which we will be voting on today, hopefully it will pass today from the board, I did notice some consistencies also related to our MLL policy. And I want to encourage us, like, this is so important because a policy is just words on a paper. But at the end of the day, it is you all who are really going to ensure that we can execute this policy to fidelity, and where it moves beyond just words but actions, and how are we truly impacting the needs of our students. And in the MLL policy, you all will see on the last, the page number 5, you all will see there's some specific data that we are requesting that we can continue to track the progress of our students. And as we track the progress of our students, we can then make necessary adjustments. And I'm seeing in your XFAT report, and trying to compare it with our data report here in the policy, that if we really are intentional about tracking to your recommendations and the policy, we'll really be able to see how we can specifically address the targeted needs. And if there are things that are not working, because sometimes you can make a recommendation and it might not quite have the same impact, then how can we look at that and readjust in a way that then again centers meeting the needs of our children. So I do want to just kind of connect the policy and connect the actual work, and making sure that we're consistently, intentionally tracking to the progress so that it moves beyond. But I have one final a question that I'd like to ask, because I know we have these recommendations, and we have about $18.4 million that you all, 18.8 in the first recommendation, 14.1 and 4.6 million, comes out to a total of $38.5 million. That's a lot of money. And hey, we have to figure out where the money comes from. So I have two questions. I have a question for our budget team, really sharing what your thoughts around how realistic this is for us, and have you all engaged. I know you have the budget recommendation, and I assume that you all have looked at the budget impact, but is there a possibility that we can do this in our current budget, and where are some things that you see could be in alignment with actually getting these done? And then my second question is, I would love to hear from principals related to, we have a lot of recommendations. If you can name one recommendation from each area, what would that be and why?
I'll start with that first question, and then Masana can jump in. I want to zoom out and just kind of talk a little bit about what the vision for XFAT. So when XFAT teams are given a charge, they're given the charge to pretend like there's no cap on money, right? So really to aim for the moon, and whatever you think is possible or is necessary, don't allow financial constraints to be a barrier for innovation. Right? Now, to get directly to your question, how this process works, as you see, the 3 separate XFATs all had very common through lines.
Yes.
So those are really high leverage strategies that we need to invest in. It may not mean a single year investment. It may require a multi-year approach. It may require a smaller scale as we move through the next couple of years. This is done at the beginning of the budget process, so we can use that as we start thinking through where are the high leverage strategies that we definitely need to make some investments so we can move forward. So there are things that, even as scripted, we might be able to do fully. Some might be a smaller scale for year 1, and then year 2 we'll be able to expand. But we wanted to present to the board, if there are things that are higher priority for you, we want to see where we can use that as kind of a guiding factor in terms of the decision-making process.
Yeah. So we saw synergies in the presentation, so I'm assuming that there could be some even synergies around our budget and where we can allocate, and even existing things that are there that we can see what we can do. So Masana?
Thank you, Dr. Therese. As Dr. Taylor mentioned, I think leveraging those high-level strategies and focusing the attention on where we land in terms of what we need to implement at what stage and at what point. I think combined with some of the work that we're going to be doing, as you know, we talked about in the governance training recently, all of that is going to get kind of wrapped up into this process. But in terms of what is recommended to move forward within the upcoming budget or probably subsequent budgets, we would obviously look at what we are doing now currently. Are there opportunities for us to reallocate within the existing budget, which would free up some available resources, then substitute for the innovations that are going to be, or strategies that are going to be recommended, as well as looking at potential revenues. If there's additional state revenue or property tax revenue, obviously those would also be prioritized versus we have salary studies, we have that to consider. So you're prioritizing, I think, what is going to be your highest impact, and then, of course, making those recommendations to be presented to you for approval in the budget process. And then, of course, we always want to make sure that we're safeguarding our reserves, but that is also an option. So at that point in time, when we get to, I think, a point of making some really strong recommendations, combined with all of the work that we're doing going forward, we will be looking, I think, at all of those approaches or methodologies in terms of ensuring that we have adequate funds to support it and sustain it, as well as to ensure that we are continuously monitoring the implementation and the return on that particular investment that we make.
I appreciate your comment around sustainability and monitoring. And I would just say if we can continue to look at alignment as we are all working with you all and we have a budget policy committee, if we can continue to show the direct alignment to the budget a line item that we have that's specifically addressing these recommendations.
Yep.
So then my final question was really for some principals if they wanted to share. I know all of these things are important. I'm just curious around what do you think would be like the best thing that you all think, knowing that all of these are important, of course. But if you can pick one thing, anyone just, or any few people if you can share.
I would like to ask that a couple of the principals who didn't have an opportunity to present,
That's good.
if they would get on mic.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to speak and to be part of this process. It was really refreshing to be a part of a group that were so dedicated at really looking at all the special services that we provide for our students. I think the biggest takeaway for me was really looking at that we are really blessed in a district that has a lot of resources and knowledge to be able to really reallocate and look at some of these services. In particular, when we look at the resources that we provide instructionally and support-wise, is just having some opportunities to brainstorm and see how we can design those so that we're looking at the whole child. A lot of times we look at things in isolation, and this XFAT allowed us to really think about and probe of how we can look at all the different ways that we can serve students and use them as our capacity. In particular in our professional development, when we talk about, we shouldn't just talk about students in special education or a multilingual learner or a gifted. Our classrooms are full of all types of students that have multi-exceptionalities, and we need to be able to help support teachers in supporting our students with those multi-exceptionalities. I'm Angie Wright, and I'm at Craig Elementary.
If we could get a middle and a high school principal to weigh in as well.
I'll take the high school one. Dr. Kevin Wood, proud principal of Meadow Creek High School. Losing my voice a little bit, so please forgive me. Our XFAT actually surveyed all of the principals, and we had pretty robust results. Of our 4 recommendations, the number one from principals was the assistant principal salary study and looking at assistant principal compensation. I love all the through lines we had with all of the XFATs. We really tripped on each other and all and saw the standards. It was closely followed by the second and third recommendations in the survey. It was really very close with the paraprofessional pay increase and also the special education teacher and MLL teacher salary study. The one that finished 4th place was the MLL instructional coach, the 30 in the school. While all are important, that's what the consensus was of the principals who completed the survey, and it was well over 100 principals who completed our survey. And thank y'all very much for the opportunity to share and be a part of this process.
Good afternoon. I'm Kimberly Bussey, the very proud principal of Decula Middle School.
I would have to say, as a whole, the entire process of serving on the XFAT, first of all, was quite insightful. When you look at the idea of having worked with such a large group of principals that represent so many different populations, and for us to all kind of come together and come to the best consensus that we could, making sure that we looked at research. So this wasn't something that we just felt should happen when particularly speaking about student-based budgeting, but the other XFATs as well. This wasn't about feeling, it was about actually doing the research, speaking to colleagues, speaking to other stakeholders to get their fresh eyes and fresh look at things. And so when you look at, for example, formulas that have been used that are older than me almost, it kind of helps you see, okay, maybe it is time to look at things differently. But the other piece is knowing that as we do this and the more that we uncover, the slower we have to go as well, and not want to go too fast with things, because we had quite a bit of time to wrestle with this. And I would say we were kind of up and down, at least I can speak for myself certainly, to say like, yeah, this is great or this isn't so great. But when you take the time and have that true collaborative discussion, I think that the whole process in itself was a great learning curve for all of us to make sure that we are very calculated in taking the next steps and not just taking it because we feel like it's right. It also has to be the right time as well.
Thank you all so much for your feedback, and I truly appreciate you all sharing from the different levels your perspectives, and we all know all of these recommendations are important, and I do believe in this collaborative approach and going to the speed of the need of our community, and sometimes it challenges us to get uncomfortable. It challenges us sometimes to think outside of the box, innovatively, do things that we haven't done before. And I continue to encourage you all to continue to look at the best ways to meet the needs in an innovative way of our community. And it looks like you all have made some of those recommendations, and I look forward to continuously making sure that we are progressing and meeting the needs of our children. Thank you.
I just want to say, even as you all were presenting, I got at least one message that said, thank you for having this conversation. Our community appreciates it. Our board has expressed their sentiment of appreciation around the amount of time and the talent that was engaged in the process, the intentionality around who was going to participate in the empathy interviews. I loved hearing about that. The focus on dignity and how important it is that we recognize that and operate in wanting to make sure that our staff are dignified and feel dignified as a part of our community. So many things about what you shared, just, and it's the holiday season, it brought me joy, and it brought community members joy. I don't know how to say it any other way. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I do want to follow up on a couple of things, because my understanding, Dr. Taylor, is you want to hear what's important to our board. And like Dr. Therese said, it's a lot of money being asked for. And we wish we had an unlimited budget to try so many different things, innovative ideas that you shared today. So what I will uplift is just a few thoughts, and that I don't think is a surprise to anyone, and that I value return on investment. So whatever we decide to do, I appreciate and look forward to hearing how we're going to hold accountable and evaluate the effectiveness of those set strategies or that investment in personnel, whatever it is we decide to do. How are we going to measure the return on investment to make sure it's an impactful investment, to decide if we should pivot, if we should reconsider, if we should do something different or not. Secondly, there was mention already of the ML policy. That was a question. Was that considered and taken into account? Because it is so important that we work comprehensively and collaboratively and not in silos. Our board worked on an ML policy that's on the table today. And I see that you all are recommending that we work on another policy that's more comprehensive to include all of our special populations. I don't know if the rest of the team noticed that, but they gave us a homework assignment, it sounds like, to work on an even more comprehensive policy that not only attends to the needs of multilingual learners, but what about students who are MLLN gifted or MLLN special ed? So I think challenge accepted, right? If you all believe that's something we should be considering, I think it's going to be worth our time to discuss it. Okay. So Dr. Teresa is saying it's already covered. So we definitely want to make sure that we are, once we're going to vote on the policy this evening, so making sure that we continue to evaluate the effectiveness of how the policies are implemented at the school level. I do want to also take time to call out just a couple of things around our human resources. I heard there was mention of compensating our APs differently, our paraprofessionals differently, multilingual learners possibly differently. As a board, we consistently hear and receive feedback from our HR team monthly and receive a report around vacancies. So based on the information that I've received, and I know one of our values as a board is being data-driven in our decision-making, I see from month to month the vacancies around paraprofessionals. That's a dire need. I see from month to month the vacancies around special education teachers. So there are already data points to support some of the recommendations that you've made that to me would just make sense to move on. I do have a question around the consideration of class size, if that was something that was discussed in light of the XFAT's explorations, right? Was there specific dialogue around, okay, if the class size were smaller, how would that impact what we're seeing, as opposed to, for example, an instructional coach? Did you all have any discussion around the implications of class size? If anyone wants to share, if that was a point of discussion, I'd love to hear some highlights.
I think that probably lives in the staffing XFAT. Dr. Mosley?
Thank you for your question. So the initial empathy interviews that we did is what drove the study of the staffing XFAT committee. So class size actually did not come up as we conducted empathy interviews with teachers, paraprofessionals, assistant principals, principals, district office staff, which is why you didn't see them in any of our recommendations per se. Maybe some of the other XFATs did, but not a part of the staffing XFAT.
I think Mr. Johnson has some additional information to add.
Thank you, Chief Harden. And thank you for your question, Dr. Simmons. Your question aligns nicely with Ms. Stone's question as well. While we didn't look at class size directly, same with my answer to Ms. Stone, the additional allocations that certain schools would receive if recommendation number 1 were implemented could be used to directly impact class size. Whereas another school, they may see the instructional coach that you mentioned may be the greatest need at that school. So it would be a school level, it would be a school level decision. And class size did come up in our 10 weeks of meeting. However, it wasn't baked into the specific recommendation that we got final consensus on as a group.
So one of the things that kind of comes to mind for me is really just being intentional. And I understand our system is one of flexibility and We engage in pilots to see what might work in some situations and whether or not we should scale that approach. My thinking is around the demonstrated research that supports smaller class sizes, specifically related to reading academic achievement. I saw that was specifically called out in the XFAT regarding exploration around reading achievement. And we see that there is a huge gap in our reading achievement. At the third grade level, I think we only have about, 60% of students reading on grade level, about 40% MLLs reading on grade level. I do ask that the district be really thoughtful around, again, I understand the value of flexibility, but also what do we know that it's a proven strategy, and maybe considering that a priority. If it's proven, consider committing to something that is proven, whether that's small class sizes or something different. Really being thoughtful around what has been proven to work in moving the needle, because third grade reading and ELA as a whole across K through 3 is something that we're really looking forward to seeing some movement around. As you've heard, as we are seeking a new superintendent to lead the work, it is a priority for our board. So I would just encourage you all to consider what is proven, and is it worth investing and committing to something as opposed to, providing that flexibility around some things that we know will definitely work. Just a thought. I do want to circle back and maybe end on this last point here. I've heard someone say this many times before: if you want to go fast, you can go fast and go alone, or you can go further together. And what you all demonstrated here today was togetherness. And so I just wanted to call that out as a strength in the endeavor that you all have completed and displayed here today. The togetherness was certainly prevalent in the way you presented and the thoughtfulness around the recommendations. And so we look forward to continuing to hear from you all in our community as we work toward our budget season, the ongoing collaboration and discussions around the budget. We're going to look to hear from Dr. Taylor and the team around what you all have landed on. And so I really just want to commend you all once again for taking the time to come here today and share with us your experiences. And kudos to the team. Thank you. Dr. Taylor, I turn it over to you.
Did you want to? Oh, yeah, no, there's a lot of work that went into it, so we definitely appreciate all of our XFATs. I know it's a lot of work. So, Dr. Simmons, I feel like we may have two choices here. Looks like we're about 5-6 minutes over what the scheduled time was. I think there can be either a super condensed Jim's recommendation proposal, or we can fold that into the briefings and then just go ahead and proceed with the agenda as is.
Board, what are your thoughts on pursuing a Jim's discussion? We do have a vote coming up next month. Would you like to take the time to have an overview, or would you prefer to hold off on that discussion during our 2x2 meetings next month?
I vote for 2x2.
I would say that I'd rather hear from Jim's today and condense our other normal monthly reports that tend to take a little more time. But if we were to commit to this time, maybe not getting into the granularity of those normal monthly reports that come in month after month, that Jim's would be good to have here, because it also demonstrates to our community their involvement and transparency around our AKS and how we move forward. That'd be my thought.
Are we able to push the GEMS report to our January work session, squeeze it in?
Well, with the transition into breaking up potentially the two, the CCRPI and KPI is probably going to dominate the majority of the work session. And if you remember, Ben Cleveland was really pushing the board to be able to have at least an hour to just talk about the work. And so that's our vision for January. So that's why that's not really a viable option to push back to January. So it's either do a condensed version today or we bake it into the board briefings. It's really only two ways.
Dr. Therese?
Okay, yeah, I was waiting. I would prefer to have a condensed version. So I think both and. I would prefer to have a condensed version now and go more into the granular and details in the 2 and 2s when we have that.
Okay, I support the condensed version today as well, so if you want to move forward.
All right, so this time I'll turn it over to Donnell West, Chief Learning Officer, to introduce her team for the last presentation. And thank you all for the XFAT. You can be seated.
So, good afternoon, Chairperson Dr. Simmons, board members, and Dr. Taylor. I'm inviting to the podium Bob Chase, Director of Instructional Resources and Support, and he will provide a brief overview of what the board will be asked to vote on and approve in the January board meeting.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Dr. Simmons, members of the board, Dr. Taylor. Please bear with me as I have skipped through about 18 slides. On October 28th, we held the 30th annual GEMS Oversight Committee meeting. Over 70 members attended this full-day event, including students. Last month, you were provided with a rather large binder that contained all of the recommendations from the GEMS Committee. The newly edited final AKS, which reflect the revisions as recommended by the GEMS Committee, is what will be called for a vote during the January business meeting. We recommend that you approve not only the recommendations of the GEMS Oversight Committee, but also the final AKS. All of the specific recommendations can be found in the report to the Board of Education packet, and the binder itself contained the final AKS. That very first sheet in the 3-ring binder served as a table of contents, but it also listed out the 48 courses. Those 48 courses were in world language, multilingual learner, special education, as well as CTAE. To close, I would like to explain the next steps should you adopt any of the presented AKS in January. You will obviously be receiving additional detailed information during the January board updates. We will continue to work on instructional tools and resources to support the teaching and learning of the new AKS. We will begin teaching the new courses should you adopt in August of 2026. And finally, if there are the AKS require any changes to the currently adopted instructional resources for that course, then we would undergo a programmatic review and pilot process to select new resources for potential adoption also by the board. Thank you again for allowing us to present this information regarding recent GEMS Oversight Committee meeting and the AKS that are presented for your consideration. I stand ready to do the best to answer any questions that you may have at this point in time.
Yep. Board, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes. Thank you so much for the presentation. I just want to show folks this binder, very thorough. Thank you so much. I also appreciate the report, the condensed, I think it was 40-some odd pages of just an overview. I have 2 questions. First, I want to highlight that I love that there were 20 to 25 students involved in this process, so not just teachers and business professionals. I'll go through the numbers. 123, where there were 5 to 6 per cluster, 21 students, over 17 high schools, 25% with GCPS educators, and then 75% with other parents, community members. So that goes to my question. When I look on the green page, this page right here, and I look at District 1, I see from, and this was only high school students who are members of GEMS, I see, if I'm reading this correctly, that on the back, page 2, Archer High School had 0 students, Decula High School, 0 students, Grayson High School had 1 student. And I know that there's some language that approximately 20 to 30, where this was statistical information, 20 to 30 student members with full district representation and an attempt at all high school representation. Just want to know how we can get more engagement, because in District 1, Archer, Decula, and Grayson are the only 3 high schools in District 1, and would like to see more representation from our students there. And then secondly, I noticed 3 different groups. Group A was a CTE. There were 15 committee members, over 15 courses. Then Group B for special education, there were 39 committee members responsible for 25 courses. And then with Group C, the ML and the ESOL, there were 17 committee members, over 6 ESOL courses, and then 2 world languages, all making recommendations on one single day. And I noticed that some of the questions were very thought-provoking and, breaking down the standards, and how do we ensure, or how do we know that one day is enough to pack in? So if you have 39 committee members updating 25 special education courses in a single day?
Perfect question, and thank you. And first and foremost, yes, with the only 3 high schools in District 1, it does lend itself to automatically becoming more difficult to have the equal representation. We're going to continue to reach out directly to the school principals, the curriculum APs as well, to get them to nominate. We try to ask them to work with the counseling department as well, because one of the suggestions that we've put into place was to not necessarily get the GSLT, the top students. So we're really trying to work with those schools and the counselors to get the a wide range of student representation. And to your point, there's different rotations that go on inside each room. So whereas you could have a room with a lot of AKS and maybe even a few committee members, they might not, every single committee member may not necessarily review every single AKS. There's going to be a huge chunk of time. Perhaps table 1 and 2 look at those 3 courses, and tables 3 and 4 do not see those courses. But tables 3 and 4 are looking at other courses. So the time consideration to go into significant depth to review the proposed AKS, it's really about the rotations and the amount of groups that are looking at them.
Okay, thank you.
I just applaud the efforts. I think this is one of the things, we're 30 years doing this. It's a great example of working with our community to look at what we do each and every year. I know that sometimes it's nuance, sometimes it's simply how language has changed and how words are being used today versus 30 years ago or 20 years ago or maybe even 5 years ago when the AKS, those specific AKSs were put in place. So, it was a heavy lift with a lot of the new courses, a lot of asterisks there. So appreciate that. It looked like the special ed side of things. And I think that, given a lot of our response from community members and just looking at what we do in the special ed area with a good lens, a more focused lens is helpful. And so I just applaud your efforts. I think this is it's a lot of work, but I, as a board member, appreciate it greatly.
Yeah, again, thank you for, I guess, the level of detail you all put into this and having the community involvement. And it's just good to see you know, all the feedback that we do get on this process and how in depth you all go, just to you know, kind of level set what's happening here. And you know, some of this is interesting to me, than being this is my first kind of stab at this, and how, you know, how we set the expectations, and how I, you know, just looking at world languages, for example, and how we you know, using real life examples, which I think is critical to just advancing that topic for our students, and you know, how important it is, especially in the multilingual learners and the ESOL students, to just, you know, making sure that you know, things are simplified to their level where it's easy for them to understand, and that the committee members get that, and that way that, you know, we're not making it too difficult for them to understand the topic at hand. So I think, you know, again, there's a lot here, and it's definitely appreciated, and that all the work that you all do behind the scenes to make this happen. So, you know, thank you for the time and effort that you and your team put into this. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for this very brief presentation, and having participated in this process, I also want to share appreciation with experiencing the robust conversations that happen at these sessions, and I do believe that the process could lend to maybe, of course, more time. I think to Rachel Stone's point, I think it's maybe some prior things or some more intensity around engagement, because I can see we have to make a decision at the end, and sometimes it's like it's really animated in discussions, and people are really passionate about these topics, and I do think that you know, more time will be helpful. But what I do want to share here is, as I look at the special education group, I'm very pleased that I'm seeing over the years more intentionality around curriculum supports for our special needs population. And I want to uplift that. I think that is great, and I want to continue to make sure that we are always, and I know we are, exploring how we can continue to meet the needs of our special needs population, and I see the progress and around our curriculum. And I also wonder around like what supports we have for our teachers, like in the XFAT presentation that we just experienced, that there were some recommendations around ML instructional support specialists, MTSS support specialists, and then there was also recommendations around development and training. And so if you could just kind of share how it kind of correlates around the increase in classes, and how are we really supporting our teachers to be successful in the classroom around their training, to ensure that our students can truly be successful in the classroom as we engage in these areas.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Not necessarily specifically to the training, but one of the awesome things that happened in this GEMS was ESOL 2 and ESOL 3 were two of the courses that went through, and that committee and the pre-work done by the directors and the teacher leaders as well really did a lot of work to align both the WIDA standards and the new language arts standards into ESOL 2 and 3. Therefore, when it was even presented to the committee in the first place, in my opinion, that's going to make it easier for a teacher, because they're not necessarily going to have to flip and compare the different types of standards. And the next step in the process, hypothetically, would be once we establish and adopt the AKS, we can then look into adopting instructional resources for that course. That's kind of a separate but subsequent process that goes into play to offer more support for the teachers in those classrooms.
Thank you, because I do think we can have these courses and then kind of have the teachers there, and then they don't have the support that they need. And I saw that in the XFAT, the recommendation was to provide those supports. So I want to also be conscious of the great work of the GEMS committee and you all, and also making sure that our students could be successful, and our teachers with the training and development that's needed to be able to ensure that there is success in these courses.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I just want to elevate the fact that this process in and of itself, the GEMS process, is something that we've been doing a long time in Gwinnett. Can you tell us exactly how many years have we been engaging in the GEMS process?
Yes, ma'am. So we adopted AKS for the first time in 1995, and that was also the first time we had the GEMS committee meeting. So this is the 30th consecutive year.
Yeah, we're having an anniversary, 30th year milestone. But I do see this as a process where we get it right when it comes to engaging our parents, when it comes to engaging our students, our teachers, our staff. This is one of those endeavors where we get it right with wanting to include the voices of those that are impacted from day to day. And so I appreciate seeing the breakdown of the students' participation. It aligns with what we see demographically in terms of our student population. Not so much with community, and I know that that's something that we talked about last year at least. I can't remember, it's a trivia question for you. Do you remember how many males participated versus females last year? Do you remember?
No, sorry, I didn't know how. I apologize, ma'am. I apologize.
I was going to say, if you remembered, I was hoping to say that we had an increase, but I'm not sure. Even though it's 20%, I celebrate improvement. So I didn't know if it was less than 20% or not. So I was trying to celebrate there, but I guess the verdict is out. But I would just continue to encourage our district to try to engage more males in the process, as well as we had 5% of our Hispanic population to participate. There's a huge disparity there in hearing from our Hispanic community members. And we've shared this as a part of our superintendent search. We're really looking for our next leader to be able to engage this community more than we've seen in the past. And so this is just another data point to support that we need more engagement from that particular population of stakeholders. Thank you so much. I know we're short on time. I appreciate the brief overview.
Can I? Because that's a powerful point, and we're listening very clearly. So two things really quick. The committee members serve a 3-year term. So this year we actually only had 27 new members. We did receive about 132 applications, but again, we only had the ability and capacity to accept 27 new members. We actually partnered with Lynette Aponte over at the International Newcomer Center, and she connected us with people like Nuri Crawford and Santiago Marquez. We were paired with the Hispanic Chamber, the Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Latin American Association. We created flyers. Those flyers were completely in Spanish. They had a QR code for completely in Spanish. The survey as well with Lynette's team was completely ready to offer any and all support services we would need for translations. And actually, of the 27 new members, 5 of the 27 new members this year were Hispanic, which is closing in on 18 to 19%.
So there's
of
some
new
celebration there. Good job. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that we only were able to pull in 27 new members, that 5 of those were from our Hispanic population. I really appreciate you elevating that data point for us and continue to look forward to hearing about the innovative ways we're working to diversify this group of stakeholders in the future as well.
Thank you all for your time.
All right. Thank you, Chief West. We will now have Kathy Harden, Chief Human Resource Officer, provide an update on staff reports.
Good afternoon again. I did not have an opportunity to publicly thank Dr. Chandra Walker for her work on the XFAT. She was very much behind the scenes in the room today, but she has been the nucleus of pulling all of that work together, and I really wanted to publicly acknowledge her and thank her for that work. Good afternoon again, Chairperson Dr. Simmons, board members, Dr. Taylor. The HR team and I are pleased to present the Human Resources Report for the month of December. Through our report today, you'll hear how the Division of Human Resources is partnering with schools to achieve the objectives outlined in Goal 1C, 2C, and 3B. This slide provides an update on our current teacher vacancies as well as historical context that helps us understand where we are in comparison to previous years. We're happy to report we have 3 vacant teaching positions for the 25-26 school year. As you have requested, we're sharing a month-by-month comparison. The last board meeting in November, we hired 16 teachers and posted 5 teacher job postings. Paraprofessional vacancies. Our current vacancies is shown alongside the same trend data as the teacher vacancies, both this year to date pattern and the 3-year trend for the month of November. Currently, we only have 4 vacant paraprofessional positions for the 25-26 school year. We're pushing for that 0, but you can see we're down to 4, making progress there. This slide shows the data regarding new teacher hires so far for the 25-26 school year, a total of 1,471 new teachers hired, and you can see by level and by title versus non-title the hires for this year. We currently have 16 contingent offers in progress. The recruitment team is highly engaged in continuing to recruit highly qualified talent for current vacancies as well as future vacancies. The team is continuously building talent pipelines for the 26 hiring season. HR recruiters, directors, and principals are scheduled to attend several recruitment events this fall. The recruitment events in November focused on diversity and critical needs teaching positions. The sample of our recruitment events are on the screen. Student-teacher mixer will be held on January 8th. This event is open to any student teacher who will graduate in December of this year or in May of 2026. This event will give student teachers an opportunity to meet principals and begin to build relationships before the hiring season begins. And I also want to highlight that this is not dedicated solely to GCPS student teachers. This is open to all student teachers across the metro area. And then our signature job fair will be held February 7th. Registration is already open. It opened on December 1. This concludes the HR report, and I stand ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Team, questions or comments at this time?
I like the addition of the historical trends. That's very helpful to see. So thank you. And congratulations on decreasing. So in October 2025, for our teachers, for example, we were at 28, and now at December, we're at 3. So congratulations.
Thank you.
I don't have a question as much as a comment. It has to do actually with that bump in October. I think there isn't quite the clarity around why that happened, but with the FTE count finalized and the adjustment across our district, the superintendent made the decision to not just move teachers around, but to leave some teachers, which opened up vacancies for new teachers to come in those schools of need. Is that an accurate?
It's accurate based off a recommendation.
Right,
yeah.
right. So there wasn't some, hiccup or glitch in the matrix. This was a move that our interim superintendent made to address some of the things we just heard about in the XFAT. And I thought that was an amazing move that he made, and I thought it was an amazing job by the HR team to, within a month, fill the vast majority of those positions. My one little question is, and maybe you don't have it, but of the 3 remaining, are those new positions that were created because of the move by our interim superintendent?
They're not it could be a combination, I don't have it in front of me, but it could be a combination of people asking for release at the end of this school semester, promotions that have happened. Could be a number of things.
It's a fantastic job. Thanks, Chief Harden.
Thank you.
Yeah, no real questions, just amazing job. And I too love the historical trends and the data that you guys are providing us to kind of see the excellent progression over the year and previous years. So keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that as we continue to look at the improvements around our field rates, that connecting the teacher retention is going to be tied to how we support them. And teachers recruit other teachers, and they can also help in that process as well. So in addition to the efforts that you all do, I also know that teachers themselves are great recruiters. And when we invest in them and do what we can to ensure they have their needs met and that they feel like, they're supported, and that can also help. So, and I know for the sake of time, we can talk a lot about what that looks like and how we can continue to look at ways to, support our teachers. And some of that came from some of the recommendations today. I just want to continue to uplift the part of the vacancy is also supporting our teachers currently. And we always see a steady trend where the Title I schools have more vacancies than the other ones. And I see that we've also made some improvements around our vacancies around our Title I. So the question I have specifically is, do you see any unintentional barriers that could impact people applying for a teacher position, paraprofessional, or substitute position? And if you can share any unintended barriers and what process you have that addresses that.
When you say unintentional barriers, specifically from anything in particular?
Your process, do you know, have y'all?
No, I don't foresee any barriers to people applying. We are constantly looking at ways to process improve. Dr. Mosley is really good about continuously asking for feedback around our processes. He engages in a regular Y'all Come session around talent management with building leaders. We talk with teachers from time to time. And so we continuously look at how we can process improve. Our recruitment strategy is fluid so that if something's not working, we pivot and shift those resources to do something different. So it's a fluid process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, as always, for the report. Dr. Taylor, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Harden. We now have Masana Mallett, Chief Financial Officer, provide the monthly financial update.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Good afternoon, Chairperson Dr. Simmons, board members, and Dr. Taylor. I'm delighted to present the General Fund Monthly Financial Dashboard Report for the period ending October 31st, 2025. This is the fourth General Fund report for the fiscal year 2025. Total revenue combined through October is $491 million, doubling that of last month, and is almost 61% below budget. Local revenue through October, primarily, of course, through property taxes, is still significantly low, 79% below budget. While though we did start to see some collections coming in October and, of course, significantly in November, the majority will come in November, and we've already seen that coming in, and then some in December. So I think we are on projections as we anticipated, so collections are coming in. Then under state revenues, they're slightly below budget, 1.29% below, but we're closer to the actual anticipated budget at this time. And then, of course, our general fund federal revenue is also slightly up from last month, about 22.4%, still below budget. This is also starting to increase. Looking now at expenditures through October, salaries and benefits have increased as well, but still under budget at 17% below. We're now seeing that full impact, of course, school resuming operations or normal school operations. Under expenses, other expenses, so your non-salary expenses, this is still hovering close to about 12% below budget. So again, all of our expenditures are below budget. Revenues are still trending a little bit below. This, of course, is still impacting fund balance. And of course, we're still seeing the continuing dip or use of fund balance to cover the expenses through October until those property taxes start coming in. So your November and your December report will start to look very different. You'll start to see the increases again in your fund balance reserves. This concludes report. What I will say, though, too, is that that will also be the period in which we start to get more realistic projections for year end. So more as our revenue comes in, our expenditures are going up, we can project for year end and any changes through that period. This concludes my report.
Thank you so much. Board, any comments or questions?
I'd like to share, thank you, Ms. Millard and Mr. Johnson. Where is he?
Mr. Johnson, Greg Johnson.
He's not here. Okay. For your training of our policy committee budget session. You all provided extensive information around how we currently do our budget, challenges, opportunities, and Mr. Ben Cleben also provided some information in general around policy-related sort of budget items, and I just think the information you all shared was really helpful, and I wanted to publicly thank you and Mr. Johnson for the work you did, and of course our co-chair here.
We appreciated the opportunity.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't worry, he'll hear the work session, hear what he missed. And I will relay.
All right, thank you so much, Chief Millard. Dr. Taylor?
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Millard. So now we'll have George Gomez and Dr. David Goley provide the legislative and policy update. Before I turn it to them, though, there are two things that they're going to be reviewing. Obviously, one is the academic accountability policy for the first read. The second is the 2026 legislative priorities. That was what we slated time for during your board governance team discussion. So the rest of the time can really kind of be dedicated to that. We've already talked about the anticipated presentations for the January board meeting. If there are no other questions about the business meeting tonight, then the rest of the time can really just be dedicated for the presentation from Mr. Gomez and Dr. Goldie, but then you have a chance to kind of talk through some of those edits that were requested from the legislative priorities.
Can we discuss the calendar as well?
The
calendar.
Oh, the meeting calendar. Yep. Any other questions about the business meeting? Any items on the consent agenda that?
I did have a question on the cellular tower going up at Peachtree Ridge and Parsons Elementary. Can you and the team provide some more details, some more data around that, and kind of the timeline? And forgive me if that was already provided, but I'm getting questions.
We got John Hopkins here. He'll provide that information.
Yeah, I can give a little update on that. If you guys remember, we just put a new tower in at Archer High School due to a hole in the cellular reception area. And that was very helpful. We negotiated a very good deal at about 30% of gross revenues for GCPS. So what we didn't know was there is a hole also at Peachtree Ridge. So in the name of safety and some other things, for example, with all the athletics out there, if there was a severe injury, there's a very bad cell signal out there. So the same company, and I had several other companies kind of alert us to this hole in the system. So we negotiated with this one with the same deal that we've got, and it's going to be going into a location on campus that's a natural clearing. And we were out there when they had a drone up in the air, and they kind of would film down to a monitor that would show you what it looked like and who would be able to see the tower. And it's in a great location where it will not be visible to anybody off campus because of the trees. But this board agenda item tonight is for the easement for them to access it and to build the tower. It'll be the same exact agreement contractually as we had at Archer. And we probably won't see anything happen for probably a year. It takes that long for them to get their permitting in place. But we expect it to be just like Archer, where it will generate about $50,000 a year in revenues.
How far is it from the school buildings? approximately?
It's a pretty good distance. If you've been down there, there's a little paved pathway to get to the softball field, and it's about a little bit more than halfway down there. There's just a natural clearing that was built as a drainage area, a little small detention pond there. So in the natural clearing there, we can put it in there without taking any trees down. So it will poke up kind of like what Archer did, just a little bit above the tree level there, but it's protected from all the viewpoints by a forest, basically.
So is there any concern with radiation being so close to a school building? There's obviously, I mean, parents have approached me. This is a school in my district, both schools are in my district, with concerns about a cellular tower so close to these two schools. Obviously, I see the point of a dead zone in the school. We're also, voting tonight on a policy of restricting phones in our school buildings. So this is, here we go again. So this is where I'm at. So what's the thought there? What's the discussion? What's the conversation? Is there studies? Is there data around this? Is there something that the parents need to be concerned about? Something I need to be concerned about?
They've been deemed safe. In fact, federal regulations, by the FCC, basically have stipulations that if a city, municipality, whatever, votes against a cell tower location, they cannot do it in the name of health and safety. So there's really no worries there.
Okay, so they can't. No, okay, so they cannot vote against the name of health and safety. Right. Otherwise, what happens?
Most of the time for cities and municipalities, they'll vote for it as it relates to zoning, but school districts like us, we're exempt from zoning requirements.
Okay.
So the only permit we need is through the federal permits.
All right. So then this is the same process that happened down at Archer?
Correct.
And the same tower that is currently up at Archer?
Yes.
And currently operating up at Archer as well? Okay.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the...
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think we're ready for the legislative and policy update.
Okay, before we turn it over to David Goldie to walk us through the new policy and legislative priority, as a reminder, there's two policies on the table that were laid on the table last month, the use of electronic devices and the ML policy. We did not receive feedback from constituents either policy, but we did receive further feedback from internal staff on the ML policy, specifically related to that section of biannual data report, specifically related to some of the data points. Matter of fact, they want to expand some of the data points. So my recommendation, however, is that we approve the policy as is this evening and allow us to come back to the board in the next month or two with some retweaks to those data points that will add more data points so we can get more data and retweak the language of some data points so that we know the specific type of data that we're collecting. None of that should stop the recommendation of approving that policy tonight, just letting you know we did receive some additional feedback from internal staff on only that specific part of the policy. So again, recommendation is to move forward on that, knowing that in the next month or two, we will come back to the board and retweak that section there with some specific language and add some new data points to that specific language. Make sense?
Thank you. Before we move on, you said there was no feedback on the cell phone policy, but Ms. Atkinson sent us.
Not from constituents to my office now. I'm not sure if Jay got some direct.
Okay.
So Chairperson Simmons, we did have actually multiple emails to our My School Board account. Happy to report back that we were able to connect with the senders of all those emails, either through email correspondence between their cluster superintendent, some of the constituents I spoke to myself. For as many emails as we received equal number of opinions. There was one through line. There was some misunderstanding that the K-8 part was law. So to some of our constituents, we had to explain that the K-8 part we really didn't have a lot of flexibility in. that was something that was mandated by the law itself. We did have some questions around our students with IEPs and medical needs. We were able to provide clarity to those folks. Some questions around the high school one, around instructional time on both ends of the spectrum, right? So we had some folks who wanted to be more stringent and make it an all-day ban. Then we heard from some students, which we anticipated, that they felt like the instructional time component would be limiting to their access to perhaps use their phone as a research device or even as an accountability measure. Safety was one of the through lines. Parents want to be ensured that in the event of a school crisis, they have the ability to reach their student. And that's something that we're certainly going to work with our principals on as we move through these next 6 months before implementation begins on July 1st. So we had a variety of different input pieces and questions, and pleased to report that the time that we had between last month and this month gave us ample opportunity to connect with the stakeholders who reached out.
Lisa will provide you at the end of the evening for the ML policy, some of the draft language that will be forthcoming in the next month or two. We will work on that a little bit more. We've got to get a better understanding on some of that potential measures, but we'll bring that back to the board again in the next month or two. Again, recommendation is to move forward, and with the understanding that we will take a look at that specific portion of the policy and make some changes in the coming months.
I have a question. Thank you, Mr. Gomez and Chief. I have a question around policy JCDAF, the electronic devices. Receiving some stakeholder feedback. If I could narrow it down to 2 questions, it was around, you kind of touched on it, the communication. How will a parent receive communication in the event of an emergency? What is that plan? And you said that the district is working on a plan. So I guess I would like to learn more about that plan. And then secondly, we know that the state law changed. And so this is impacting grades K through 8. This is a brand new state law change, not something that GCPS created. It is a state law change impacting grades K through 8. Can you shed light into why grades 9 through 12 were added?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Stone, for the questions. So to the emergency situations or those crisis situations, the district would continue to leverage all the communication outreach that we do now to parents. So whether it's through Parent Square, emails from the school itself or from the district level, we would continue to reach out to parents. What we continued to hear from our families, though, was the need for them to actually be able to personally reach their child, which as a dad, I empathize with. And that's our work with local schools. Part of where our work with local schools is going to have to center in these next 6 months. Parents want to be reassured that in the event of a crisis in their building, that they can reach out to their son or daughter. As a district, of course, just to repeat, we'd make sure that we continue to leverage all of our communication outreach platforms to make sure our families are aware. And we'll continue to work with our schools on how they will allow communication or encourage communication between parents that this policy might, in the eyes of parents, hinder. To your second question, you're correct, K-8 is dictated by law. 9-12, really we leaned into two different areas when we made that decision to focus strictly on instructional time. So I do want to just begin by reiterating that. So in grades 9 through 12, there's no impact on before the school day or after the school day or any non-instructional time. So in our high schools, kids will still be able to use their cell phones on transitions, between classes, in the lunchroom, in any unstructured setting. But what we recognized was a sentiment from our school leaders and our teachers that the K-8 ban might be effective in some form in the high schools, right? So research tells us that in the absence of cell phones, what we've seen even in some neighboring districts who implemented before we did, we chose, Ms. Stone, to kind of use the timeline provided, some real positive benefits being reported, right? Higher levels of student engagement, reduction in student discipline. Unfortunately, a lot of our discipline does stem from social media and that type of thing. And also a sense of belonging that seems to be increased when students put their phones away and aren't worried so much about the number of likes they're receiving on a poster in class time, but are more engaged in the conversation in class. So it really focused on student well-being that we thought could be increased, student engagement that we thought could be increased, and student comprehension and ultimately achievement. So that's why we implemented the 9 through 12 instructional time component.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And then I guess my last question, I think there was some, I don't know, like miscommunication around, because the language says from bell to bell, essentially. So does this impact, can you clarify whether this impacts buses?
So bell to bell means from the moment the first bell of the school day rings to the end. So I always, when I speak to constituents, reference my experience as a middle school person. That's kind of where I did my administrative work. So that would have meant at a middle school that I had the honor of being the principal at from 8:50 to 4 o'clock. That's when that ban to access of personal electronic devices is in effect. So what the policy asks on buses is that it's discouraged and that it should not be a disruption. And if that is a disruption, students might be subject to our student code of conduct. So very similar to what we do now, Ms. Stone. I mean, students aren't encouraged on buses to use their phones. They're discouraged to use them in the name of safety. So it's really language in the policy that reflects our current practice.
Just want to share as a parent, communicating with my son just on logistics is very important. And in particular, I hear that from several parents of high schoolers in particular. And just, coordinating the car situation or after school activities, before school, what's happening, all of that is really important. So I guess what I would encourage is, because we're not required really to do 9th through 12th grade by law, but to continue to work with the principals to figure this out around really what makes sense. I understand we need to avoid the distractions, and also think that there is a real need for some parents to communicate with their children. And I just want to hold that as true for me personally, but also for many other parents that I've heard from and students. But obviously, I'm going to hear more from students, in particular middle schoolers. They want their phones. So, but by law, I see that we have those restrictions. But certainly for high schoolers, I'm assuming we would have a fluid process around how we engage in implementing this cell phone policy in our high schools.
Absolutely. So to your point, we do recognize that the responsibilities of our high school kids to their families, you mentioned logistics and transportation. That's a reality for all of our families, mine included, right? And that's why we wanted to make sure we emphasize only instructional time in high school, right? So to make sure that students have access of their personal electronic devices in high school multiple times during the day, right? So before first period and after it, they have it, even in that transition between first and second. And in between periods, then to the lunchroom setting itself as well. So there's those multiple opportunities for our high school kids to still access if they have to have communication with their homes. We wanted to make sure that we honored that need.
I'm just curious about the process. If you could share with the board, as y'all engage in this with principals, what exactly the process looks like from one school to another, because then I can also see how one school may have a more lenient process around cell phone usage, and another school may have a more strict process, and then the kids are going to find out, and then we'll have another issue around, how it's inequitably distributed because of that flexibility that we're kind of allowing for the principals. So I want more information on the high schoolers and how we're implementing it with equity.
Yes, ma'am.
And to add to that, I don't know if you were going to respond, but going back to a piece of feedback that we did receive, there seemed to be some ambiguity around what is considered instructional time. And so this was a parent that was advocating for more, it sounds like more definition in the policy around what is considered instructional time. She raised this thought of, in one classroom, maybe the teacher finishes up a lesson 10 minutes early. And so now, is it okay for students to pull out their phones? Is it not? And that's where we get into this possibility of things looking different from school to school. So more generally, I would have loved to have received maybe a summary of the feedback the district received so that the board could consider it. I kind of feel like we're bombarded with the feedback today in the moment. And it would have been helpful to have that feedback in advance to kind of mull over and maybe reach out to stakeholders to get more input and insight. Because we are a policymaking body, I do request that the board be presented with stakeholder feedback in advance of the day of and needing to make a decision. But I'm hoping you can provide some feedback around that specific inquiry around what is considered instructional time, and did you all not provide us the feedback because you decided not to make any changes based upon what you heard from stakeholders?
And that would be an honest misunderstanding on my part then. My assumption was when an email went to the My School Board account that the school board was in receipt of that. So if that, Ms. Atkinson, is not accurate, then that was a genuine mistake. So that would be my...
We did not receive those emails. We got one email about that in particular.
Okay. To the instructional time question, instructional time would be the moment a class starts on the schedule to the moment it ends. To your point, we wanted, and to Dr. Teresa's point, making sure that the variance between schools is limited. It's part of the reason why we chose to use the full timeline that the state gave us to make sure that as we work with schools, it's as tight an implementation of the policy as possible. So to go back to the question, instructional time would be the moment that class starts to the moment on the schedule it ends. So that provides kind of a norming across schools. And to your point, if a lesson ends early in one class but not another, it doesn't create that ambiguity and possible confusion for students.
So I just wonder if that should be in the policy. Should we specifically include that language in the policy to prevent this variance from school site to school site? If we could define what we mean by instructional time, that would be my consideration for the board.
And I would say any other predictions around variance. Frankly, I mean, I would say the K-8 is something that's required by law that we need to do. So I could support that K-8 because we have to. So I think we need to still flesh out the high school part. So just.
I have one more policy question on the one on academic accountability, policy BAAB on pages 3 through, well, at page 3, the chart. The language that's scratched out versus the proposed language, it's the use of the word almost. So for empowered support, almost all students are achieving above the levels attained by similar students. And then for flexible support, I see many students. And then on the next page, it says some students for assisted support, some students are achieving at levels attained by similar students. And then for managed support, many students. Can someone shed light on the preference for that language versus a percentage? So if we were to say almost all, that's what, 70%, 75%? Versus, so the use of almost all, many, some students versus, I don't know, 50%, 70, like, why weren't percentages used?
I can jump in. Well, I think that feedback is actually really valuable and important. Tonight is about the putting it on the table. So I think some of those type of feedback and suggestions, we have a little bit of a window to kind of incorporate. We're not asking for the board to take action on approving it. It's just to put it on the table for the 30 days.
Okay, thank you.
And
clarification with the cell phone policy, use electronic devices, make sure that we get the language this evening correct. We're going to recommend approval of that policy with the addition of a definition for specific instructional time.
That is what I'm requesting, that we define what is meant by instructional time, so there is not, to reduce variance from school to school.
Got it. I just didn't want to hold up the book.
Dr. Simmons, I just looking at the policy as it's written, there is a definition of instructional time. Now, what it does not include is sort of the exact definition that Mr. Neville talked about, where like it would leave open that class instruction is ended and the teacher's not talking anymore. It's ambiguous with regard to that. So just so staff understands, the amendment that you're asking for we have a definition. I think if we go back, we need to know, is it the desire of the board that we make that to where it's, when you're in class, no matter what's happening, that's instructional time?
So that's what my initial question to the board, and I know we kind of jumped to another policy, is do we support adding language to this policy to further define instructional time as from the time the bell rings till the time the bell rings to end the session? I think that's how you kind of defined it, Mr. Nebo, from the time the bell rings to begin the class to the time the bell rings to end. Are you all on board with adding that to the policy to reduce variance from school to school in implementing the policy? It's the question at hand.
And if it's helpful, I'll just read the definition for the purposes of this discussion. Instructional time is defined as the duration during which K through 12 students participate in teacher-led instruction or curriculum-based learning activities. This includes classroom teaching, guided exercises, discussions, independent assignments, and assessments, but generally excludes non-instructional time such as recess, lunch, and other non-instructional segments. So I guess it depends on how you would read that, but I mean, independent assignments, I mean,
Mr. Pereira, are you reading from the statute?
I'm reading from the policy, the
Okay.
proposed policy. It's
Okay.
on your agenda. It's,
So one of the issues that the parent brought up with the feedback is this idea of if your class finishes early, right? Do you want kids to be on their cell phones in the class? And that could open up to interference. They can be on social media. They could be doing some things that you wouldn't want them to do during that time. And then also this idea of what I do in my classroom, what if somebody else does it differently? And so then that student is saying, well, Mr. So-and-so doesn't make us put our phone away or lets us use our phone when he finishes. So the parent was advocating for being more definitive and explicit here to avoid that ambiguity and that variance from class to class.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Mr. Kunnison.
Yeah, I guess the question from a staff perspective, do we see a loophole there?
There hasn't been feedback presented to us that this feels like a loophole or ambiguous, but the point of the constituent is well received. So it could be amended to say the duration during which K-12 students participate in teacher-led instruction or curriculum-based learning activities from the scheduled start of each class period to its scheduled end time. And that would help clarify that it was from the beginning of the class period to the end. We could craft language like that to help make it more certain.
And that's a little concern, and this is why I asked the question, Mr. Pereira, if you were reading from the policy or the definition. So if you look at the House Bill 340, it defines bell to bell to include instructional time ending with the final bell signaling the conclusion of the school day, and shall include all scheduled instructional time. So if first period is from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., that's scheduled instructional time. Breaks, transitions, assemblies, and other school-related activities occurring between the start and end of the school day. So just wondering if you want to put a reference point to the code.
Yes, no, I think one important distinction, the statute refers to K-8 specifically. And so what the debate right now is on is that additional component that we've extended that to high school. And so what you're describing, middle school students and elementary students can't have their phone essentially for the entire time that they're present in the building. There is, just for, I think, just common edification, there seems to be a lot of appetite in the legislators to extend this to high school in some fashion. So that's going to be something that's going to be discussed in this next legislative session. This is just an extension. This is above and beyond what's expected, I guess is a better way to say it.
Yeah. So I want to share, I think, I have concerns, and as we continue to talk through, my concerns really lie beyond the 8th grade, the high school level, because I do believe that there would be some variance in that, and I think the variance would also impact the violations and improper use. And I think that when we think about our student discipline and our policy JCD, I have concerns about how already we can see disproportionate impact on certain groups of students. And I would be remiss to say that this would also not impact, or also impact those students as well, disproportionately. I'm just by looking at the data and knowing the data with other things, and I just wonder if certain students are using it for various reasons, because they work, right, or because their parents, there's an emergency, or because we have people in different communities that are using their phones because of the, their fear around ICE and immigration, and this is their way to make sure everything's okay, or to contact or communicate. And so I just feel like then they could be punished because maybe there's more usage. And I know it's complicated, and I recognize all of that. I just have a concern around like the discipline infractions of a person who may need their phone and what that could look like. And so if there's a lot of variance from school to school and area to area, and the needs may be different because maybe the students are working, I just feel like that I wouldn't even support this from a legislative perspective for high school kids because of these reasons. I mean, if they do it, they make the law, but I wouldn't support that right now because of the concerns, and we don't even have a plan or process. We don't even know what we like.
I wonder if we can do this.
I don't feel comfortable with a high school.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the law requires by January that we adopt for K-8. So is it possible for us to go ahead and get the approval for K-8 tonight and then pause on the high school component and then add that? Or are we required to approve the entire policy?
The board could certainly, it gets a little difficult because we're basically rewriting the policy in a motion. And because this policy is one that includes everything. What I think, I think we could probably try to make that work if you want to pass a motion that directs staff to amend the policy to only pertain to K through 8 and remove the other restrictions. Staff would have to go back and do that, but I think we would probably satisfy at least the spirit of the law that requires us to pass the prohibition, and then we can finalize that perhaps with additional language. I would probably want to bring it back to have the board sanction the actual language of the policy as it's drafted.
I can see for some quick, easy changes that, I mean, if we want to do K-8 because we have to pass this by January, I could see where in D, in section 2, terminology D, K-12, change that. In section 3, B, delete the whole section B. And section C, change instructional times to 9:12. And so I see, like, again, in maybe only 4 areas where we have specified a K-12 or 9-12. And so that's what I'm seeing just here. There may be 4 areas. So I don't think there are substantial changes here. So I'm willing to support to meet the legal requirement of K-8. So I don't know what the board thinks, but I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so do we, regarding the motion to amend the policy, do we need a majority of the board to agree to that now, or is that something for the business meeting?
No, I mean, you're going to vote on it, but I think what the motion would need to be, just so the more clear the motion could be. So if you could do what Dr. Therese just said, which is we vote to approve policy as presented with the removal of subsection B, C, and E. That is that we can live with. But what I'm nervous about is something that says, well, we want to make changes to the policy based on content without being able to specify those sections. If you can specify the sections in the motion, I think it's very clear what you're doing as a board, and staff knows exactly what has passed at that point. That's my only concern.
Is it possible, because staff has done this before, they've edited the policy before we went out and voted, is it possible for the staff to take the edits of this quickly, again, like these are 4 areas, to edit out the policy to be K-8, and then that way it's a clean vote that's not, that's already edited for that? I know we've done that before, so I know there's time as well and staff constraints. I know we've done it before, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I think for the purposes of clarity, if we could do what you said, and I'm quickly looking at it, and it looks like you probably could just put in your motion to remove B, C, and E. That way, because the public has also been given a copy of this, and they would not have knowledge of what you're voting on if it's something that we draft between now and then. So it's probably a little more transparent if we could do it that way. And I think I agree with you in looking at it. I think we might be able to do it that way. So I will review it and make sure that I communicate with the board which sections would need to be removed.
Okay, right, and so to be clear around our motions, right, okay. Thank you. Board members?
So, Dr. Therese, you are wanting to remove sections B, C, and E. Can you confirm?
Yes, because that's all the areas where I saw.
So under number 3, we're talking about general provisions, sections B and C.
Under terminology, section D.
Okay, so section 2 terminology,
And then,
part D, as in David.
yes, and then we have general provisions, that's B, removing that. And then under general provisions again, that's section 3, editing 3, which is, I think, the 3rd sentence that says, and during all instructional times in grades 9 through 12. So just as an edit there that takes away the 9 through 12.
So under section 3, letter B as in boy, and that's just that one part,
And then C.
as well as C. Are there any feedback from the rest of the board around removing those pieces in advance of the vote tonight?
I'm just going to say that I support the policy as written, and so I'll vote accordingly based upon what y'all come up with.
Any other feedback?
I support the changes that Dr. Therese has mentioned. I have a question about section D. Is that required, or is that can you confirm whether this is required or language that we are at? So the application to buses.
I'm sorry, I was looking at terminology section. Can you repeat your
Section
question?
3, general provisions, subsection D as in dog.
And the question was?
Whether that section was required by House Bill 340, or is this something that was added by the district?
Yeah, this is referenced in House Bill 340, but it's also something that I think we value as well when we think about safety on buses, that we want to make sure we discourage the use of electronic devices to help encourage the safety of the bus ride home.
Okay, so I think we have the direction to the district is to remove, for the purpose of voting this evening, part 2, letter D as in David, and then part 3, B as in boy, C as in cat.
And to confirm, Chairperson Simmons, on C as in cat, it's editing to remove the words "and during all instructional times" in grade 9-12.
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Gomez or Mr. Goldie?
Maybe.
Dr. Goldie, back to you.
All right, good afternoon. All right, yes, good afternoon, Chairwoman Dr. Simmons, board members, and Dr. Taylor. We bring you one policy as new business for this month, as already been mentioned, policy BAAB, academic accountability. In simple terms, the policy has been revised to align the policy with current practice. So the recommendation is just to lay this on the table for feedback for till the next board meeting.
I want to share, this is a really important policy, and I have been advocating to update this policy to be in alignment for a while. So I'm excited to see, and I see you're saying, yeah, but like, this is great. I think finally we're here at a point where it is aligned with the actual work, and I think oftentimes we have opportunities in our current policies to look at how we've made some improvements in our processes, but the policies aren't quite aligned with that. So this is actually some things that we're already doing. It's just now codifying it in policy, and I do think that this is important in this process of how we're codifying it. I also appreciate Mrs. Stone's comment around looking at the language, and we have time to do that. Encourage community members to look at this policy and all of our policies on the table. Provide us with specific feedback, if you can, on these policies, because it's quite helpful for us to understand and get feedback from our community. But I'm excited to finally see this policy on the table and to see how you all have already created the necessary alignments for the work that we have to do and will continue to do. So thank you for that. I know, Dr. Simmons, did you have any comment on the MLL policy? Like, did you want to, or no?
Oh, is there any other comment on this particular policy?
Yes, I just stand by what I said earlier around kind of quantifying the many and some and all and most or almost, and distinguishing between many and some, like how do we, because that's a different tier. It goes from flexible to assisted. So just some clarification.
Thank you.
Yep. And I support that.
Okay, and we know that this policy is now going to be on the table for 30 days for additional comment. Thank you for encouraging our stakeholders, Dr. Therese, to provide additional input there. Dr. Goldie, did you have some
Yes,
additional
sir.
information for us?
Not on the policy, but I just would like to move on to legislative priorities, if the board's ready for that.
Well, before we leave policy, I did want to, in light of our XFAT report outs tonight, and I know we have our MLL policy that we're looking to vote on this evening. I was reviewing the recommendation from our XFAT, and one of the things they mentioned was this idea of a comprehensive policy, which our MLL policy does really include and dedicate attention toward our special education population if students are designated as both. The one maybe gap that I see is that our policy doesn't specifically call out gifted education. And do we want to address the XFAT's feedback and go ahead and include the call out of students could be identified as both MLL and gifted? Do we want to go ahead and update our policy to reflect that this evening before we vote, is my question.
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Simmons. And I know, Mr. Gomez, you mentioned that there would be some changes to the policy. Like, we can vote on it now, and there will be some additional changes based on staff feedback. So,
You can amend the policy on a monthly basis, yes.
that's what I was gonna ask. So we can amend the policy to have a tighter language and maybe around the gifted, because I think that is, I'm grateful Dr. Simmons did call that out, because that is an opportunity for us. We do have language around AP classes, language around advanced courses and honors courses, but like gifted, I didn't see where we have explicit language around that in this policy. So I do support if we can make an amendment, but I think you already mentioned we were gonna make some amendments. So, I mean, if we can just.
Maybe, are you suggesting even working with the district staff to maybe frame some language around gifted particularly? Is that what you're also, not so much?
I think in light of the XFAT, and I know the XFAT team did review this, so I'm gonna move forward. I think we can move forward as your recommendation was to support the MLL policy. I just think that you mentioned that there were gonna be some tweaks to it for some data things, and I think if one of those tweaks could be included in gifted, that would be great.
So I support moving the policy forward this evening to vote. And I just want to get clarity around if you all can take the policy to members of the XFAT that made this recommendation to see if there are additional edits that they would like to see in the policy so that we're addressing their recommendation to create a comprehensive policy.
Yes.
We feel that this policy is what they're asking for, but maybe it's some pieces we can firm up and make more clear, for example, around gifted identification.
Yes, 100%. All I was mentioning is that every policy, we can add any at will. So this is a great example. We're going to accept the policies recommended tonight. We're going to come back next month, and we're going to have data additions and possibly gifted language additions. So
Okay.
we can do that, and then we lay that on the table for 30 days, and we go through the same process. But we can do that on a monthly basis.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, legislative priorities.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Simmons. So, first of all, I'd like to
Thank you
thank
for
the
that.
board for very detailed and very specific feedback on edits to the draft of the legislative priorities. You should have this document in front of you with some priorities, some highlighted sections. This was based on feedback that we had received up to yesterday morning. We did receive some additional feedback this morning. Probably, from my perspective, the most efficient way to go through these edits is if I ask the board a series of kind of very concise questions and get the board to coalesce about certain decisions, and then perhaps, with the board chair's permission, open it up to any other comments or questions. Does that work? Okay, so if you have this one in front of you, the first question is highlighted. We have the title Access and Opportunity. There was a request to change that title to Equity. So if the board could come to an agreement about what they would like to do with that title.
So I just wanted to clarify why I suggested access and opportunity and not equity, specifically around bullet number 1, which is pertaining to transportation and wanting to allow to work towards students having access to transportation for after-school activities. I see that as something that would benefit all of our students across the district, not just one particular subset. When I think of equity, it's more so to level the playing field. Maybe you give this group something you don't give the other group. So my thinking around what we have listed here was that this is providing access and opportunity to all of our students. And so I would ask that the board consider keeping it as is.
I would agree, Dr. Simmons, with keeping access and opportunity, and I would add another reason, which is we're putting this in front of the legislature, and I think we want the best opportunity, just given the current environment. They're talking in these terms, access and opportunity. So we're aligning what we're asking for with the people that we're asking to help us in these areas. So I'm in support of the way it's currently written.
I just want to be clear that those are two different reasons. I support equity, and I have no problem using that terminology. In this case, I feel that the specific legislative priorities listed, because they apply to all of our students across the district, I didn't see that as an equitable pursuit, but an access and opportunity pursuit.
Did somehow I say I was against equity?
I didn't say you did.
I'm just saying, I think we put our best foot forward with the people that we're trying to work with.
I didn't say you were against equity. I just said I have no problem utilizing that term when it's appropriate and when it's applicable. And so here I didn't feel it was the most applicable terminology.
And the reason why I suggested to use the word equity, and now your explanation, Dr. Simmons, I understand you're talking about access to transportation. What I was meaning when I saw the other bullets was more around equity. So aside from transportation, I think equity is access, opportunity, and resources to meet the needs of each and every. And I think that that suggestion was rooted in the pathways language around workforce programs, around expanding CTAE, and also I would submit to add another bullet around investing in preparation for college and university access, which could be more supports around, like, I think the relationship we have, Dr. Taylor, with the Georgia GGC around, like, supporting students with FAFSA or investing in, like, how can we get support from our legislators around really helping our students if they want to choose, if they choose to go to the college, really helping them more with supports, because we have great counselors in our school system, but they're also overwhelmed, and there's a lot there that we can invest more in our college and career area, and how can we support our students go to university and get scholarships, get financial aid, choose their pathways, and really supporting already our counseling department, but there is an overwhelm for many of them when a lot of students are really trying to figure their way and a lot of parents don't know. And then we also have some gaps around the MLL population of families who are really struggling with the process around trying to support their children go to university. And so I think that, like, I see that as an equity gap for me. So, like, that's why I was considering those two bullets, adding that. So that was just my rationale there.
Yeah, I mean, I love the explanations, and I love this robust discussion. I do like the way this section is titled based on the bullet points that we've presented for discussion with our delegation, and I think it's important that the way we're drafting this, it's going to allow us to create a very robust discussion, and I think that's going to be helpful for the topics that we're trying to present to them, and you know, for that reason, I do support the way it is presented and written.
Yeah.
And I think we can hopefully coalesce around that. So thank you.
So I do want to, before we close out, because I hear, I think, 3 board members supporting access and opportunity, but I also hear Dr. Therese uplifting the addition of a bullet around access to college and careers and more support and funding to support students, for example, with FAFSA and different scholarship applications. Can I hear from the board around adding that bullet under access and opportunity? How do you feel?
I have a question for the district around our existing efforts for college and career readiness. Like, for example, I know Tequila High School has a college and career person in the building that is, in addition to counselors, and follow on social media, but where they post a lot of things around supporting college and career readiness. Like, there was FAFSA Day, there was Apply to College Day, you get an immediate decision day. So I'm wondering, and this is a dedicated person for that position, in addition to the guidance counselors, is this something that is consistent across all, at the very least, our high schools?
The college and career academies all have one. There's a dedicated position. During the pandemic, when we had the ESSER funds, we did expand it to all high schools. That was one component that wasn't sustained when we moved out. When the ESSER funds sunsetted. So in the non-academy schools, it's more of a function of the counseling office and how a principal might be able to creatively create a position, but there's not one for outside of the academies, the 7 academy schools.
Okay.
So I need to hear from the board around adding a bullet to support additional funding or resources, something to that effect around getting students to prepare for college and applying to college and solidifying, securing acceptance into college and resources to go on to a university or college setting. I would like to hear from the board on that so we can keep moving.
I support adding that language.
Yeah, I don't object to it. I think anything that advances our students into the higher education system I'm all for it.
Okay, so can we add that?
Yes.
Thank you.
There was a Senate study committee on the affordability of higher education chaired by Senator Orrock.
Okay.
Part of the recommendations was using some of the Hope Scholarship reserves to help with that. So I think we would get some support
Awesome.
to sponsor something in that area.
Fantastic.
But yes, we can craft the language along the lines that was provided to add an extra bullet in that section.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay.
Next question, Dr. Goldie.
Next one. Yes. So yeah, we had for QBE, we talked about students with autism. There was a request to expand that to special needs so that it was more encompassing.
Any feedback here? Does anyone feel strongly about not changing autism to special needs?
I have a question around, so special needs, students with disabilities, when we think about students with disabilities and students with special needs, it's an umbrella term, and autism is under that umbrella, such as OHI, like ADHD, and then you have specific learning disabilities. My question is, what is the rationale for the use of the term autism?
I think there's been a lot of discussion down at the Capitol about autism, number of students being diagnosed as autism. So I think that was put in on a staff recommendation for the board to consider. And obviously, if the board wishes to go to special needs or students with disabilities, that's totally the board's choice.
Would special needs be seen as something that's already, we have waited for special education, right? So is this a way to call out autism as something that's not being addressed under,
It is.
right?
So it just
So it's-
depends which way the board wants to go, whether more specific term or an umbrella term.
I made the suggestion.
Yeah, I just want to know why autism, because there's so many other eligibilities.
Exactly.
And like what my colleague has stated, if autism is not getting the support or the autism program or students with autism aren't getting the support, then can we clarify? I just don't know why autism is singled out when there's other eligibilities like OHI and.
I think what I hear Dr. Goldie saying, so this bullet is saying to create a weight to address that specific need. So we don't have a weight for poverty currently.
No, we don't. We do
And
have
so-
a weight for, obviously.
Do we
special
have a weight
needs.
for multilingual learners?
There is, well, it's,
So there's a couple of reasons, folks. The state may or may not recognize the full autism spectrum. So as David made mention, we have our ear to what's happening in the Capitol. And the delegation has been talking about autism as something they would like to bring specifically in this next session. But this is just a recommendation. So when you ask the reason why? Because we simply have our ear to what's going on in the Capitol, and we've made that recommendation. That doesn't mean that's a good recommendation, doesn't mean it's a bad recommendation, because this is the board's legislative priority. I think somebody brought up why autism, which is a very good question, and we're just simply asking today, do you want to focus on that specific subset, or do you want to focus on the more general subset? Both ways will still get us a discussion point with the General Assembly, because we can always go back and use the broader term to talk about autism when they talk about autism, or use that broader term to talk about any exceptionality when they talk about exceptionality. But I think that the gist here, Dr. Simmons, what you're saying is asking for them to consider the weight that they're giving to these categories like poverty, ML, special needs, or autism.
Well, we don't even have a weight for poverty. So I was
Correct.
trying to get at, are we asking them to create weights for these categories, right? There's currently not a weight for poverty. So, and then my question was, is there a weight for multilingual learners currently?
Yes.
There is. So I think then what you're saying is we want them to reconsider the weight for
Correct.
is that what you're saying? Okay.
Well, and I could say that I also know that there are legislators who are looking at QB and they are looking at different weights, that it's inclusive of special needs, rural population as well, and also students who are MLL learners and away for poverty. So I do know that there are already some advocacy already happening around the QBE and really those weights. So I would say, in alignment with that, I heard someone say there's also advocacy around only autism, but I want to say that we, of course, as GCPS, support our students with autism and want to make sure that they have what they need. We need to be doing that anyway because it's the right thing to do. And we also know that there are other types of disabilities that we also have opportunities to address in different ways. And I think my suggestion around the language to be more inclusive was really rooted in addressing the special needs population of all in different areas because of the so many different spectrums, autism spectrum, which I think we certainly need more education and learning and awareness around the spectrums and high functioning versus non and what that looks like and how we can support our students. We still need to do that, and I think we can do that. And I think that the weight around disabilities would be will really be beneficial here, in addition to the other weights like poverty and MLL. And
Okay, so the question at hand, how do you all feel about keeping it as autism or expanding it to say students with special needs? Can I hear from the board around that question?
I have a question. When we say special needs, again, thinking about special education versus students with disabilities, are we referring to the students with disabilities who sit for our milestones, who receive accommodations, who are on track for a regular high school diploma, who are factored into our graduation rate, or are we referring to the other students with disabilities? Or is it just all encompassing?
so when I think of special needs, to me, it includes like the umbrella. It includes student with disabilities. It includes students with
Like
maybe
severe
learning.
cognitively?
Yes, severe
Okay.
cognitive. Yeah.
Okay.
But if we want to break it out, we could say special needs and just, but
So
it still includes.
Yeah, I'll defer to the district because when I think of students with disabilities, I think of the SWD indicator in our graduation rates. So if we want to use special needs or students, I defer to the district on language for.
Well, and I'm also curious too, what the legislative body might feel about the very general language of, say, disabilities or special needs versus something very specific as autism in terms of the scope of the work that they can accomplish at the level they can at the state. Do they have to be very specific in terms of what we call out to create legislative work, or can they be very general to say, hey, we can throw funds at this, or we can provide support here? I guess that's kind of where my curiosity lies, and maybe this is a discussion that we can get even deeper with them when we do have an opportunity to meet with them in January.
Yeah, this is something where if the board decides to put students with special needs or disabilities, legislators might ask questions, then we can be more specific in that discussion.
That's kind of where my head's going. That's kind of leaving that discussion open too.
Because they may come up, hey, we think we've got some funding for this specific area. And if we've got that as a priority, which is an umbrella, we can say, yes, we see a need for that.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought is this, you guys brought it to us strategically because you've heard autism as a item that's getting some interest around increasing funding. So we could be specific strategically and say, let's say autism. Or, since autism is included in the larger umbrella, we empower you to actually go down several paths if we say special needs, where autism is included.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so,
Yeah. Can I just
Team,
say?
I just want to assert that we have a redistricting meeting at 6 p.m. and that I was not quite aware of. So I just want to remind the team that we do have that commitment and to try to move expediently.
Okay. I just had a quick comment around the legal term. So I do support us having it as a broader term that's more inclusive.
Yes.
And I think disability, looks like when I looked it up, is the more appropriate term because it has legal.
So are we in agreement with
identification.
special needs?
Or
Okay.
disabilities.
Students with,
I prefer students with disabilities.
Yes. I agree.
okay, I think I see the Steve saying, okay. Students with disabilities, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next highlighted bullet, the original request was to remove it altogether, but then it subsequently requested that the language was changed to provide the investment in personnel to enable safety and security for students, teachers, and educational support professionals. So it's just an edit to the second half of that.
Say it one more time.
Yes, so provide the investment in personnel to enable safety and security for students, teachers, and support professionals.
Yeah.
So that's broader than just specifically targeting SROs. It just maybe campus security associates, security. So it's just a broader, it just, like I say, it's a bigger umbrella, but in discussions out at the Capitol, we can, depending on what they're focusing on, we can say, yes, that's what we're meaning, or that's what we're focusing on, SROs.
Okay. Team, any feedback here, comments?
I support safety and security in general. I think that it's important that we also, even as we have legislative advocacy, that it should also be aligned with the board and not with a person or a group of people advocating for their. I think we should make sure that our legislative priorities are in alignment with the advocacy at the Capitol.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think safety and security encompasses the safety and security of all of our students.
I would say that a particular area of equity that has surfaced with our community is why do we not have SROs at our elementary schools? If we're concerned about the safety of each and every of our kids, and we're concerned enough to put an SRO at the middle school, at the high school, why aren't we putting them at the elementary school? Then it speaks to the potential lack of equity for those at the elementary school level. And I think this addresses that. So, I mean, I think the broader safety umbrella is going to be addressed. Our legislature seems to have the habit of putting safety and security at the top of what they want to fund. So I think specifically to give them the reason that we are interested in additional resources there is the equity of being able to provide that person. And that's the message I've heard, when I've heard from stakeholders, that's the message I've heard.
Yeah, I think it's been our district's intent to have an SRO in every single school building. Am I not mistaken? I think that's been the direction of our operational, vision.
Well, that's an operational decision. I think this is from a legislative priority perspective. I think it's very nuanced and complicated, and in particular with some populations that have a different level of risk. And we already have attendance issues with some of our students who have fear around the terrorism that they're experiencing in communities with ICE. I think that some of that is also impacting attendance. It's also impacting just emotional well-being. And so I think when we, in general terms, advocate as a board for safety and security, that includes, to me, looking at different ways in how we secure our facilities, different ways in how we secure safe classrooms, how we secure protecting our families. And so I think the broader term is very helpful for us to be able to advocate for the needs of our students in a way that might not be where it's specific to having, someone walk around with a gun versus parents engaging and walking around, or family members or community members, or looking at ways on how we can invest in discipline and improving the discipline disproportionality and what the root causes of that, like investing in mental health services and investing in mentoring, tutoring programming, looking at how we can really advocate for funding that's around really ending the school to prison pipeline and addressing the core roots around ending the school to prison pipeline.
Okay. Thank you. I don't want to take away anybody's voice, but I do want to try to move us ahead. So I don't know if I've heard from Ms. Stone, but do you support keeping the specific request or priority around school resource officers, or presenting something more general?
So here's my thoughts, and then if we could, I guess, put it into language. I support everything Dr. Therese said, addressing the root causes, right? Mitigating the school to prison pipeline. My concern is in the event of a hard lockdown situation, and we have, especially in our elementary and middle schools where there are no weapons detectors, my concern is, as someone who has experienced lockdowns, who have experienced active shooter, both personally and professionally, things move really, really fast. And my concern is if we do not have at least one person who's able to protect our students, then what is the alternative in the event of and we have an example like Sandy Hook. I am concerned, that is my concern. And again, I support mitigating the school to prison pipeline, finding innovative alternative ways. But I just have that concern in the event of a hard lockdown, especially in our elementary and middle, since we don't have weapons detectors.
I think we can operationally make decisions. However, as a legislative priority with our legislators, I think the broader term is more inclusive of meeting the needs of all children. And so I think the broader language would be better.
So, Ms. Stone, are you supporting keeping it as school resource officer? As stated, are you supporting keeping the priority as stated?
I need more time to think about it.
We have to vote on this evening. So we don't have more time. We have to have this in place. Can you go on to the next? Is there
Yes,
one more
yeah, we've got
priority?
One more. So the final highlighted section there says increase salaries of K-12 public school employees to promote the recruitment and retention of highly qualified staff. There was a request to add in there, increase the salaries of K-12 public school employees and board members to promote the recruitment and retention of highly qualified staff. So insertion of board members in there.
Okay, feedback, comments, feedback?
Yes.
I think since the funding of board members is independent for every district, that to ask the legislature to try to go in and standardize that, I don't see that as adding that as making sense. I mean, I want more money for our people, so that's good, but, which is what you have. My question around this was, why is it sitting by itself without another, was that going to be inserted elsewhere?
There wasn't a natural fit for it. So probably the one that's closest is safety and well-being. So the question was, under which heading would because we did have the heading of funding, and that's now safety and well-being. So the one that closest fits is safety and well-being, if you think.
Yeah, I'm good with that, and I'm
Appropriate
good with keeping it the way it is.
Okay.
Yeah, same here.
Okay, so we'll
Yeah.
keep it as is and put it under safety and well-being. Circling back to the investment in personnel, my thoughts on that are, I feel that we've had success with school resource officers in Gwinnett County Public Schools. I haven't met anyone that has expressed a concern with the SROs, and I've actually heard from people that would like to see an SRO at their school. However, because this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is, we're advocating for this to be something implemented statewide and not just Gwinnett specific. I do have
Yes,
concerns there because I don't know that SROs would be effective in every community across our state. So I do support broadening the statement to be less specific to SROs and more concentrated on just safety and security supports. That might look different from district to district. I don't know, but I do recognize we've had success in Gwinnett. I don't know if that would be the case across the state of Georgia.
And I can support what our chairwoman has stated, and then adding language to address root causes.
Any other questions? Dr. Goldie?
No, that was it. I think part of what you were saying, Ms. Stone, about root causes comes under the next bullet. Provide the necessary mental health supports to include mentoring programs that may be utilized to promote safe and secure school sites. So I think it would come under that umbrella. Yeah, one very quick 15 seconds. Going back to the cell phone discussion, I can let you know that 2 separate Senate study committees, the one on chronic absenteeism and the one on social media and AI, the impact on children, both of those committees have recommended extending the cell phone ban into high school. That doesn't mean there's going to be legislation, but it's significant that 2 committees have recommended that. So I just wanted you to have that
Thank you. Good to know.
I have one more quick thing. I mentioned around class sizes as some feedback for legislative priorities, and you mentioned study committees. Do you see study committees on class size reduction as in other states? And is this something that we can prioritize this upcoming session?
So currently, there's a state statute that sets out limits on class sizes. Currently, GCPS, along with many other strategic waiver school systems, have waived that section of the statute to give those districts operational flexibility. So doing a legislative priority about class sizes, whether it's asking the state to reduce them, you've still got a number of charter systems and strategic waiver systems that may already have opted out of that provision.
Yes, thank you for that. And my question is around on class size reduction. So for example, other states have been able to mitigate the student-to-teacher ratio by getting additional funding from their state lawmakers to add more staff in the classroom. So I am wondering that since our state legislature has granted us this Swiss or this waiver, that we can have funding to support teaching and learning in our schools because our class sizes are large. Because I hear reports of our class sizes for core content classes, 35, 40 kids in a single classroom in English, language arts, science, so like our core content. So just wondering if we can prioritize, is there a study committee on innovative ways to, if we can't lower our class sizes, mitigate the student-to-teacher ratio?
Yeah, so at the General Assembly, there hasn't been any study committees on class sizes at the moment. I know it's a very complex issue with state funding, FTE funding, funding individual students, and also providing certain level of state funding for teaching staff. So that may be something that may require an XFAT, or I don't know if Ms. Allard can add some financial numbers with regards to if we've reduced classes by 1. I think there's a number.
I know it's a couple of people that want to weigh in. It's almost 5:30. We have a 6 o'clock meeting, so we do have to wrap this up in the next 2 minutes.
What I would add really quickly, in the interest of time, is that through your QBE, at least your policy driving the QBE reform, the increases in the FTE weights will naturally drive an increase in funding, which will then in turn allow you to then address class sizes. Does that
Thank
answer your
you.
question? Because it's tied to the formula that the state, correct.
Student enrollment, yeah, head
Correct.
counts.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Golden.
Yeah, I just want to share, you mentioned the XPAT for class sizes. I actually support that. I think that would be a great idea to be able to do more comprehensive kind of analysis, because I think beyond just looking at, are there any other ways or any other creative things that we could do, and maybe having the XPAT, they did a great job today giving us all these recommendations. Maybe it's something that they can give us some quick recommendation. I don't mean to say the word quick. I'm speaking quickly because we don't have time. But I'm saying I do support having an XPAT study on class sizes
I
and
support
looking at
that.
how we could do that.
I support that as well. Okay. Any other final comments, questions? All right. If there are no other comments or questions, this concludes our work session. Please be reminded that at 6 p.m. we will hold the second public hearing on the 2026 redistricting in the boardroom. And at 6:30, there will be a performance by the Collins Hill High School Chamber Orchestra in the lobby area. Thank you so much. Board members, I need a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing or deliberating upon the appointment, employment, compensation, hiring, disciplinary action, dismissal, or periodic evaluation of a public employee or officer, considering student discipline matters, discussing and considering threatened and/or potential litigation with the board attorney, and/or discussing the acquisition, disposal, or lease of real estate, and/or discussing cybersecurity plans, procedures, and contracts. Board members, do I have a motion to go into executive session?
I make a motion to go into executive session.
I have a motion by Dr. Therese. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion is seconded by Ms. Stone. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. It is unanimous. We are now into executive session.
Okay, now considering.